Here.
Ms. Parker? Here. Ms. Reed? Here. Ms. Schooley? Here. Dr. Barta? Here.
All right, is there a motion to approve today's meeting agenda of August 18th, 2023?
I move to approve the agenda for the meeting of August 18th, 2023 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for the meeting of August 19th, sorry, wrong day, 19th, 2023 is presented. Roll call please, Ms. Savada.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Ms. Schooley?
Yes.
Dr. Barta?
Yes.
All right, great, we're rolling. So this morning, we're going to start off with a check-in and conversation about the specific items that the board directed the district to be attentive to during phase 1 of regional opportunities for thriving schools. And so we'll turn it over with that to Michael and Lisa. And welcome, thanks for spending your Saturday here.
Yeah. Thank you for having
Not
us.
all of your Saturday, this morning here. No, you don't get out of here. Yeah, until 7:30 tonight. Go ahead.
Okay, so in your board materials that you received as pre-reading, we provided you with a written update around your phase of the resolution for phase 1 of regional opportunities for thriving schools. It had a tab, or it had a table where it indicated whether items were complete or in progress. And so we're going on the assumption today that you all have read that. I wanted to have Michael here. Michael Zweifel, as you know, is one of our strategic partners. It's a 1-year position to support our transitioning school communities. So she and Bethany Robinson are serving in these roles to be sort of at making sure that all the things that we said we were going to do this year with our transitioning schools are happening, and also that we are attentive to the real-time needs of our schools. And so Michael's going to talk a little bit about that, as well as the planning that has gone on into the launch of the school year. In addition to Michael and Bethany, we were able to fund positions specifically for Lasley and Lumberg. So they have an embedded strategic partner at their school. We did some sort of issue spotting last spring and identified that both of these schools were growing tremendously. They both have dual language programs, and we're going to need some additional support really embedded in their buildings. And so we are thrilled to have Christina Carruthers, who was formerly at Swanson. And also we have someone who's starting at Lasley, a woman named Kim Price who's starting at Lasley. So we are excited to have the support, and I think so far we are very glad that we have it because there have been some things that have come up. So I'm going to have Michael talk a little bit about the work and planning that she and formerly Wanda Hamilton did in the spring of last year as we were planning for this year, and then also some of our successes and challenges as the year has started.
Thanks for having me this morning. So last year we really focused on the transition of the students, families, and staff, and worked a lot with the building leaders to be very intentional about their planning of what professional learning needs to be in place for our staff. And many buildings started that learning last year and kind of added onto it at the beginning of this year and are threading it throughout next year. So for example, at Lucas, they have the ESD program. And so Lori, that's an existing program, but she did professional learning at the beginning of this year to make sure that all of the new staff was onboarded, but she's also embedded that learning all year long to continue to grow in that area to support. So that's kind of one example of how professional learning has happened in the spring, continued as they launch this year, and how they're threading it throughout. And all of the building leaders are being very intentional about making sure that it's not a one and done. So they want to make sure that whatever population they're serving and the needs of the staff are that they are being very intentional about that professional learning and threading it. They've launched the year very strongly with the name, strength, and need kind of across the board. So knowing the name, strength, and need of their staff, but also knowing the name, strength, and need of their students, and creating that culture of belonging, which they've partnered with Tara Pinion, her department, and a lot of those professional learnings as well. We looked at the data in the spring and really looked at what is going to be the make of this organization and what plans do we need to make sure we have in place to address that we're ready for the students that we serve and the families. A lot of them are looking at being very intentional of creating family opportunities to learn about some of the unique programming that they may have in their school, and they're partnering with different district departments in that. So the one thing that I really want to highlight is the leaders in these welcoming buildings have been so intentional and thoughtful in all three of the categories of family, staff, and students. And it's really starting to show as we begin the year. So Bethany Robinson and I had the opportunity to go and visit many of the welcoming back opportunities. And for the staff activities, Stover went up to Breckenridge. I was not able to join, but I did get a video, and they did a whole team building activity up there. Belmar did launch theirs at Ball Arena, which is a very neat. All of the leaders really talked about their leadership story and their why, and had their staff talk about their why, and it framed that. They did value walks with the staff. They did fireside chat to get to know the leader of the building. Most of the staffs grew quite tremendously, and they spent, we were able to secure the funding of the 2 additional days through the Community First Grant. Those 2 days looked very different based off of the schools, but I would say over the 7 days, they really had a very strong sense of belonging. So some used the first 2 days really focusing on unpacking and getting their building started, and then went into the welcoming activities on that Wednesday, the first official day, and then some spent those first 2 days really focusing that culture of belonging. So it kind of varied, but very much threaded throughout. Ted Lasso showed up a lot. I haven't seen Ted Lasso, but I was like, now I need to go watch Ted Lasso. I know, I was like, I felt a little left out when I was watching.
We did it just for 10
I know, I know.
You,
I know, I don't have Apple TV. I know. Okay.
I know, I'm with you, Stephanie. I have to.
All the time. Yeah. I gotta keep my life.
We also really focused on really having strong structures and routines as they've launched the school year. And a lot of our schools have just really had to rethink, like, what does arrival look like? So we, in partnership with Janelle and Risk Management, did a lot of traffic walks, looking at the hug and go lanes, and watching how flow would work if we need signage.
So a video.
We have a video at Belmar, which it's a really nice video. And so we have been really, I think the intentionality that our leaders have put in is just really commendable. The other thing that I just really want to highlight is Bruce Huxley and his team. They have coordinated the moves across the district and have done amazingness to ensure that all of our kids had what they needed as they started the year, and all of our staff. So they worked up until we were moving desks the day before school as numbers were changing with enrollment, and the responsiveness of his team to coordinate to make sure we had everything in place from the facilities wise, what has been really tremendous. Yeah.
So, this all sounds really good. I'm wondering, can you also talk about any challenges that have come up?
Yeah.
I've been hearing a few things here and there. A lot of it seems to be really emotional, hard challenges for some of the teachers and kids and things like that. And I just wonder what may not be going so well and what we do to address that.
Yep, absolutely. So some things that we've definitely had come up has been a lot. I wouldn't say a lot. I think every building has been a little bit different. I think kids have been a little nervous walking into their new schools. I think that's to be expected. But I think as they've gotten in, the leaders have said that they've adjusted well and they've been really intentional of creating some of, connecting activities among their classroom communities. Some of the challenges, for instance, lumber, breakfast has been a challenge. They didn't anticipate to serve the number of students that they were serving. So they were serving over 400 breakfasts. So that was one challenge that we had this week. Beth Wallace was out yesterday. I was out yesterday. And we came up with a system to add 2 additional breakfast carts and serve through 3 lines to ensure that we could get students through in a timely manner. So that's been one of the concerns that was raised by a community member. However, the school had already raised that, and we were in the process, so we kind of knew that that was coming. Lasley was another area of concern that we had with the community, that there was not Spanish-speaking staff in the office, being a dual language school, and the population that they served. We now have someone starting on Monday to support the office full-time. So those are, yep.
Thank you. Were any of the schools that were welcoming schools, did any of them not receive the number of kids they were expecting and might still be challenged by being small or not having had the ability to add more staff? So facing some of the same challenges that a small school could.
So
Thinking of one in particular.
Yeah, I don't know that Michael's best position to answer that, but I do know, no, that's okay. I do know that Brenna is going to be presenting to you all, like we typically do, just in terms of the numbers of what our enrollment is looking like. I think that came last year, maybe in October, but we are tracking every day and looking at both formally and then what we can see in the system, and then Dr. Kim has a tracking sheet, so I think every week our elementary schools have to enter how many students they have, how many classrooms, and that's what we're sort of monitoring specifically, like if we have classrooms that are getting too full, like in terms of they have too many students and how we might shift, and then other schools that maybe don't have as many students as we thought, and we did this last year, and so I think these first 3 weeks of school are really important to see how many are showing up, but certainly we still have some schools that are under enrolled, certainly even receiving schools, and I think we hope to, it's something we have to continue to address, and as we roll out the recommendation for phase 2, there may be some schools that once again may receive some students because of the closure. It may grow in student population the following year, but certainly in that, I think all the schools are larger than they were. Are they so much larger that their resources are increasing, like some of these schools that are growing by almost double? That's definitely not the case in every situation.
Do you think we'll be updated on that in October?
I think so. I need to verify when we did it last year, so I can get you more concrete.
That would be perfect. That'd be really great to know and understand.
Yeah.
I know that's in the works. I'm anxious to see the data that we're collecting directly from the schools through Dr. Kim's office, because it will tell us not only the overall enrollment, but it will also tell us how many are in each class, and so we'll be able to see, how many split grade levels we have or not have, where we have class sizes of 15 and where we have class sizes of 30. That kind of data too is really interesting to me, just as we go through this transition.
We'll say there's the first bullet on the trackers is we are monitoring student enrollment and receiving schools as of August 10th. We'll put this together. Current enrollment numbers for a majority of receiving schools, 9 schools, 56% of the schools is within the range we predicted when we make consolidation recommendations. So we'll get more specific, but I do know in some instances we hit our high number, and in some we didn't. But so it looks like there were 2 schools that expected enrollment numbers are lower than the projection.
Oh, you're in the document that's in the binder? Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in the.
Toward the back.
It's like
Yeah.
this.
It's under
After all
policy
the
update, policies.
Right. Well, it's like the first page. Oh, wait, no. This.
It's under the big picture
Yeah.
up top.
It's the first bullet.
So may I ask, that is one, do you have more you want to go through and then I have lots of questions, but I don't want to blow.
I'll just highlight a few of the family activities that they have been really intentional about hitting. Lumber partnered with Edgewater Collective in Casa Bonita, and they had like face painting and like a little carnival out there and had like a huge turnout. And so Powder Horn had the ice cream social, but just some really great welcoming back events as they came. Another challenge that is still in the works is kind of enroll Jeffco and the transfer over. And so there were a few students that when they came, we didn't have them enrolled, but the schools responded pretty quickly to get them enrolled. So there was a few glitches on the enrollment side.
But we knew that. I mean, I think when we tried to reach families and some we were not ever successful in reaching, and so this is where we were sort of unsure who was going to show up, and that's why we have the additional support. I think everybody at the central office has been really responsive, like knows that they need to be incredibly responsive to get from receiving schools as we start the year. So.
I have a question about, and so before I was over, just was there, on the first day of school, and everything seems, even with construction still going on, it seemed like it was very smooth, and, it felt like, oh, this is just a first day of school. It didn't feel like there was a layer of anything else, but, which I appreciate from the staff and leadership. What I'm wondering are a couple of things. So if you could talk about some of these students and then teachers that are now at different schools are moving into a totally different teaching philosophy or curriculum or whatnot that's being used. I assume that's the case.
I would think because our curriculum is more standardized, it's maybe because the teachers that are moving into like a dual language school, for example, or where you have it lastly where the school was not previously a dual language. I think that might be the most extreme case because like Lumber is receiving from Mulholland, and both schools were dual language. So I think
That's the difference in literacy curriculum, I think is what Stephanie said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking about professional development for staff.
The Vivian people who were coming.
Right, new classical going to,
Yeah.
to silver. And so I'm just wondering about the layers of support for professional development for specifically in those cases where the curriculum is totally different or the pedagogy is totally different, whatever it is. How are we supporting those teachers? I'm sure, it's mostly for food building leadership. I'd love to know about that since it's it can be a lot to switch. It can be a lot materials, all this stuff.
I think a lot of it actually started in the spring. So many of the schools did the onboarding of the HMH. I know my teachers at Vivian went to their new schools in the spring and attended some of the HMH before they even left for summer. So they were able to do that. The instructional coaches, I believe, are working very closely with the staff to understand those new literacy resources. And I also believe, I'd have to double check this with Martha, but I believe there's additional like HMH supports specifically, which is I think all of our schools, receiving schools are doing it, like the vast majority. And so I think they offered at least last year, and I thought I saw it in the literacy element that they have different professional learning opportunities for that as well. For math, IM, all of the schools that adopted it, it's new for all of the buildings, so there's been a lot of professional learning around the math curriculum and the IM. Math, those who had math expressions were familiar with it if they continued it, but IM, they had the opportunity to attend summer sessions, and then they also did kind of a launch at the beginning of the year. So I think through the PLCs, I'd imagine a lot of the work would support through, I think it depends if the school's adopting IM, the big focus is really going to be around the math, and so I think that's where the instructional coach and your building leadership is going to come in and support that literacy. And then for non-IM schools, their focus really is HMH, And so that's where a lot of the teachers who are new to the curriculum will also have that, or new to the grade level, right? So even if you taught first grade and you're now teaching third grade, there's that learning curve there as well. And so through those professional learning communities is an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a big shift. So,
Yeah, I think some bigger than others, and I think it's a more smaller scale than what you would anticipate.
Yeah, it's been here too, is when I started in the spring, so there was less disruption just in fall, when everything happens.
Yeah.
Could you also talk about the students in center programs and how that transition has gone for families? I know there were some schools that did not have the center programs at all, and some may have just grown their programs, but I'm thinking of a few in particular where it's a brand new program for that school and how that work has happened.
So I think I know 100% that work actually started in the spring, and so they've partnered really close with Matt Floro and their assistant directors to create a professional learning plan specifically to prep the staff for giving those centers. I can speak specifically to DHH very well. So our DHH teachers actually went over and did a semester-long professional learning, just what is the difference between auditory oral, which Maple Grove happens to have, and total communication, and what does it mean for sign language, how do you work with an interpreter. And so also with AN centers, they did trauma-informed practices, what is the TRAILS program, so each of the unique programs that actually started in the spring, and then they all did a mini professional learning session to get new staff on board, because we know not all staff was hired in the spring. And then, like I said, Lori, like Lucas, we're looking at how do we thread that throughout and have that continuous support to support our students, not in when they're in the center program, but I think also in the general education program, and how do we support our general education teachers and working with students in our center programs.
What about the staffing for the center programs? Are there lots of openings still?
So we met with Matt Floro and Dave Weiss. Was it last week? I feel like all the weeks started coming together. So there were a few teacher openings that happened. We did problem solve and we were able to get solutions in there. So we were able to. So like at Lucas, they had in ASD 2 ASD openings. We moved one teacher from a different center program that was overstaffed, and then we were able to tap into our recent retirees, and we found an ASD retiree who was able to step into that position to fully staff her position. At Powderhorn, they were short on an AM teacher. They were interviewing this week, so I think it might have gone through. They partnered with Kindleview, and then there's the middle school down there.
What do you
Summit Ridge. And so they were sharing teachers between, 2 days a week, Kindleview was sending an AN teacher over to support Powderhorn, as well as Summitview was sending a teacher 3 days a week. So there are solutions with all of this that are based together, appropriate staff, and have the support to start the
And I just want to acknowledge that these solutions are temporary, short-term. We have to figure out better long-term solutions, and they're not ideal. We continue to engage in conversation with our associations about how to differentiate incentives for our positions that are understaffed or underfilled. You know, they're there, the budget's there, we all approve, but the people just aren't. And so Matt and Jeff are both actively working with Jeffco on opportunities to support both special education paras, transportation drivers, and we're running data on what percent of certain job categories are unfilled, so that we can maybe have a standard of if a position is X percent unfilled, that we might provide this type of incentive. We had some data from 2 years ago where we did some of this work, and it really helped in the special ed arena talk to them, and show, kind of talk about how what we did 2 years ago really worked, can we try that again?
Is that like a statement?
I can't remember if it was a stipend, I think, and we ended up closing the gap on the unfilled positions, and then the data that's really interesting that we can send you guys in a written update is the number of people who we attracted with that incentive, like 80% of them stayed with us, like for most careers. So it not only brings them in the door, but it's helping once we get them here, they're staying with us. So he's working with Jeff, and then with Jeffco, we've not talked about sped teachers with JCEA, but I think we need to start just considering that.
Because there's even like 4 sped teacher positions, I think, right? Like in those, not just parents, these positions that were under.
Talking about special ed or just general?
Yeah, special ed.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, yeah.
Yes,
The
correct.
teacher.
Yes.
Yeah, and those are the solutions we came up with. There are still some para openings in, I think, in some of the buildings. Yeah.
It's just a challenge, period, across the nation and multiple, all of our districts.
Susan, do you have any questions that, or comments you want to make?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Other questions about how this is going?
It's not.
Actually, Steph, may I ask one question, please?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
In the document that I'm looking at that's up on my little screen, the second part that says identify process changes and improvements for any future closures. Nowhere. So on the previous page, the one that talked about FRL, that one, the second one down, evidence-based plan for Title I and at risk. And I guess, we're not unique in how everything is a little shifted because of lunch and food. How are we doing that? It says complete. But how are we actually tracking that? Because that also goes to pre-K, and maybe you guys talked about it yesterday, but I just would be interested in how we're actually identifying that.
Yeah, we did not talk about that yesterday, Susan. We were calling.
Okay, then I'll look at the package when I get back. That's fine. I don't want to repeat it.
No, sorry, we did not, is what I started. We did not
Oh,
talk about that.
okay, okay.
So there's a lot of moving parts in this. I'm glad you're flagging it, Susan, because it is something we're paying attention to. But we have completed a redesign of how the funds are allocated to our pre-reduced lunch students.
And I'll just make.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And I know that was a lot of the work. I just want to make sure that it continues in that way, because as populations shift, right, or things change, we want to make sure that our SBD dollars are doing what we intended them to do when we shifted it last year. I just want to flag it, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah. Is there any sort of timeline estimate, or as the state thinks through any changes to how we're determining free and reduced lunch?
That would be a great, I think Ed's here for
So
so maybe as
Hi,
a
Ed.
legislative question.
Speak of the devil.
So maybe we can cover that, hold that over for
Okay,
the
yeah.
next conversation.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
have a question about the transportation situation, especially for schools that might have gotten really good. I'm being Powder Horn from my area, for the pickup lanes. I mean, that was such a cute video and it was really good, but some configurations of the streets are just not all that amenable to the backup. If you go into a red lighting, you don't have the corner and stuff. So are we able to track that kind of thing and just some studies and see if some changes can be made?
We did commission traffic study. Powderhorn was part of that, so we're sorting through the preliminary information that we have. Michael and our facilities team have been working with schools on the best, situation for pickup. We talked about things like calling the bus kids out first, and staggering some let out so that we ease traffic. But I think part of this is just staying on top of these issues and troubleshooting them as we need to based on the specific circumstance of the school and the traffic flow pattern. But it's something we're paying really close attention to.
Can I just end on that, because this is not just a university school problem.
Yeah.
I've been a part of 5 different schools now, only one has not had this problem, where it's just like an absolute crazy mess, pickups and drop-offs. And so it's a problem in all the schools, and I don't know how to fix it, but it feels like, I don't know, we kind of just do it. It feels like a safety hazard.
Yeah, I feel like this is, I mean, I don't know the answer to this because I agree this has not been unique to the ROPS process. Built so many of the schools that we have in Jeffco, particularly like as you go from the core out, were built as walk, bike schools, and they're just not as much anymore, increasingly not, as we sort of move boundaries. And I think as we look at the boundary study particularly and think about what's going to make most sense to have some parity is the right word, but across schools and how we're setting boundaries, it's going to come up, I think, continually, because I don't know that the design initially for the schools reflects the current reality that we're living in, which is way more people are driving their kids to school. We do have some transportation challenges that are just undeniably challenges. And so I feel like all of that's going to have to wrap into the boundary study because I'm not sure it's going to go away.
Yeah, and choice, so like, a lot of people don't have bus options, so they're choicing in different schools.
Yep.
I think we'll learn some stuff from these traffic studies that we're doing, and hopefully we can take some lessons learned and apply them across.
When we do the traffic studies, there's like two pieces or buckets of information. One is things that we can do as a district and we can get those things going. The others are things we have to partner with our city municipal partners on in order to make the changes that need to be made. So we're prioritizing the stuff that we can do, and then we will begin working with our municipal partners too.
I would just say some of the SROs though, that have been out this week helping are yeah.
Great. Any other questions or comments, things to highlight for Michael and Lisa around this piece? We're excited to be with Bethany and the whole team. Thanks. That work.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Just like to say, it's exactly 10:15, so well done, team. Yay. I know. Okay, so we're gonna move into the next hour and a half, which is a big chunk, and it's board member community engagement and communications, but it's sort of in some different sections. So just as a review, the first part, which we may or may not have a whole lot to talk about, because I think we have addressed this and talked about it through our board self-evaluation that we work with CASB to create, and in other forums as a board, but really reflecting on how is communication working among board members as us as a leadership team, and are we getting what we need to get in those conversations. Another part around external engagement, so what do we want to see happening in terms of board members and how we engage within our director districts or more broadly within the community, and then thinking about a legislative agenda and how we want to think about getting that prepared and be thoughtful about what we're putting out there for our legislative agenda for Jeffco, and some of the communication channels and mechanisms we currently have. How are they working, and is there anything else we'd like to see moving forward? So that's the kind of bucket of stuff, and along with that, we can talk through how some of the things we spoke about yesterday around school site visits, the engagement with community superintendents, how we schedule ourselves as a board may not be resolved in this retreat, but that we can see how we can place them in a next steps category so that we can address them and make sure that they get, there's some solution of kind to those things. Is there anything else in this kind of broad category that you all would like to see included?
Just maybe, I don't know if it's included in those categories, but we had talked about really early on doing something that is like a board
awesome. That'll be in part 2, and we will make sure that we add that to the list that's on there. I don't know where the, oh, you have it. Nice. You're driving.
Keep up with you that day.
Okay, so
You can't.
no, I prefer to be a passenger. So this first section is really around how are we doing? And again, we talked through a bit of this. Some of these categories were included in the board self-assessment around, you know, how do we have difficult conversations and how are we thoughtful about the various perspectives that we need to sort of take into account and represent as board members on behalf of those who we serve. And I'll let you go through this, but these are sort of some things that are possible on this list, but doesn't have to define what we talked about. Really what I'm interested in understanding is how are things going in terms of how we are working as colleagues to be able to effectively move through and find a place where we land. May or not be in agreement, but really in the nameplates where we can get to the speaking with one voice beats. So there's nothing more than here an open conversation around some things that may be barriers to that, some successes that you see or things that are working well, and if there's anything that we need to adapt or change in how we really structure communication among us, because it's in part, these are relationships that either work or don't work, but then there's like the structure of are we helping to get there regardless of whether that relationship, you don't know who you're going to serve with, always. So that's really where I'm trying to go with this. I'll just open it up and see if there's any thoughts or comments that folks have around this director-to-director communication, which I know sometimes feels like middle school, because oftentimes we can't talk more than one-on-one, so we're playing a lot of like phone tag. Yeah. So, thoughts, reflections on this piece?
I'm just going to throw out something I did talk a little bit yesterday that came out about and it's tangential. Because we have always been very careful that we have 3 people in place talking about something, making decisions. But based on the fact that there's a lawsuit right now from Epps and Marshall against the state legislature where they're citing statute that says 2 people cannot even communicate without it being an open meeting. 2, just 2. And then I read through the statute, and it does say these governing entities, they do mention school boards. And so it just, you know, like I don't want to, I don't want to fall prey to that debate right now, but it is just something to throw out there if somebody's going to start saying, because you can't function. That's impossible to function. That statute would have to be changed. There's no way in the world. Well, if you get it for a legislature, 2 people are going to co-sponsor a bill and they can't talk about it without it being an open. So it's just.
Florida School Board, they were like, you guys keep talking to each other. I remember they talking about it. And I said, well, you know, only 2, you can't have a quorum. And they were like, yeah, not allowed to talk.
Is there any, I mean, what are some perspective around this? From Matt or from Ed? I don't know. I'm not as familiar. I did not read the statute. Does this seem like a likely, like there will be a likely change in how we function under sunshine laws based on that lawsuit?
So, for Ed, he's one of the best you guys are lucky to have.
Yes, ma'am.
What I would say is it probably be helpful for the board to get an updated legal opinion from your counsel to say,
Okay.
here's what we think. The second thing is politically, CASB, along with the Rural Alliance case, local government special districts advanced a bill to make some corrections to the open meetings law, and the governor vetoed it. And so, Bill, and I can't recall the bill number off the top of my head, 1235. Anyway, I'll find it for you. But anyway, and then this lawsuit that Mary references. So, my opinion is that heading into this next session, there's going to be a pretty good, well, actually, one more thing. So Senator Hansen also brought forward a core bill that was passed, ended up not being nearly as extensive as he originally wanted. So my take, just from some initial conversations with legislators, and they're kind of like bears right now, they're coming out of hibernation, right, and realizing the session is coming. So we're starting to hear what they're thinking. Any legislative fixes to Cora, open meetings laws, executive sessions are going to be really delicate things because the legislature is being sued. Unfortunately, a number of Colorado school boards seem to be in the newspaper almost daily for these things. So I think the legal piece would be great. Working with whatever efforts CASB, your own lobbyists, and your other groups might be able to bring forward, and then just being aware of the issue as well. But Ed, what else would you add?
Good morning. I don't have much more to add other than, yes, talk to the general counsel. I don't think at this point, say talk to your general counsel, then I'm going to add my opinion. I'm not sure you need to do a lot different at this point. Just be very careful because people are watching all the public entities. And with all the things Matt said that are going on between the state and other public entities that have not been as respectful of these laws as they probably should have been, there will likely be changes this year. But I'm not sure at this point we can do anything different, but I defer to Julie.
Yeah.
And it seems like the other school boards, Matt, you can jump on board with this, but it seems like the other school boards, the issue was daisy chaining. It wasn't that two people were talking, it's that two people reached a decision, and then one of those two people talked to somebody else and got them on board with the decision. And then, so if we're not doing that, which we don't do,
No, you guys don't.
So, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I didn't stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night, so I take my legal information for what it is. You are absolutely correct. As I read the judge's ruling, that's really where he took the task of the local state board to say you had, in fact, created a business meeting outside the purview and vision of the district, the citizens. So the example I generally will give, if the board president sends out an email, hey, we're going to have pizza before the board meeting, generally acceptable, right? The board president sends out an email, hey, this policy is up. What's your vote? What's your vote? What's your vote? And that's where it becomes. So, as I always say, email is the devil. I encourage you not to put anything in email that you don't want to see in a court case or as a headline. And then just be aware of those things. I think, it's always appropriate to raise your hand and ask the lawyer, are we on solid ground here? And if we're not, then we need to stop and get back on solid ground. So that's always appropriate as well. So I think to Ed's point, some caution and just being aware of best practices probably is the most appropriate response in one conflict.
I was just gonna say, I feel like Julie does a great job of giving Stephanie advice on what is allowable in an executive session, what is not allowable. She's pretty conservative in that arena. And frankly, you guys have been an incredibly transparent board, in my opinion, based on previous experience, working with lots of different boards. And I mean, an example of that is this year when we had some negotiations, conversations around budget and exec session, and we said, let's just talk about this publicly. So I feel like in terms of the spirit of transparency and the spirit of the law on all of this, you're operating in a really great space just from a best practice perspective and a values perspective. I did write down though that we'll have Julie take a look at what's going on in this lawsuit and pay attention to the legislature this season and make sure that she can continue to give you guys the right advice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I will say, my personal stance, I try to be on the very conservative side of where the exec session of where we land of things, and I think we all, even when we're like, don't stand next to me, right? Because I just don't feel like we just don't need to get anywhere near even the perception of impropriety.
We're having a session and we're talking, and then all of a sudden we're like, shoot, we can't talk about this.
Yeah, but move away from me. It's almost like a bubble fear factor. But that being said, I also want an effectively functioning board. And those two things sometimes feel like they're in conflict when you have really good intentions of trying to do good work, and how we can communicate and understand each other's interests and the really complicated things that we're talking about. To me, it's a really strong value to understand, Mary, what is your interest in feeling this way or that way about whatever it is, having nothing to do with votes, but just we need to find where the shared interests are. So it may be something we want to talk about again, maybe not, maybe it's premature to think about it as something that we put in a legislative platform, because it may sort of be irrelevant, depending on what the litigation ends up being, and I appreciate that Julie can weigh in on that. Thanks for bringing it up, Mary, because I was not aware of it. So that could fundamentally shift answers to these questions. Because right now I feel like, for the most part, for me at least, I feel like we're able to have those one-on-one conversations and be able to understand, even if it's not agreement, but understand where folks are coming from. But a shift in any sort of direction away from us being able to communicate one-on-one would change these dynamics, I think. In a way that I don't think is positive, but that's just me.
So, I think, Madam President, CASB does have fairly extensive legal resources for your information, non-legal advice, but for your
Yeah.
information. All of those things are out there. It's always good to review those things. We just updated that. In the bill I was referencing, not 1235, 1259.
1259.
House Bill 23, 1259, and that's the one the governor vetoed. I believe that's a question best to ask the governor.
You don't want to speak for the governor?
His veto statement said that even though the bill had been significantly edited and had vote changes better than 75% support, which in our current makeup is pretty remarkable in and of itself, that he felt it was a step away from local government transparency. But his letter's out there.
Okay.
And next time you see the governor, you can ask him.
Yeah. Thanks for directing us to those resources. Susan, is there anything you'd like to add in on this section? Because I don't want to belabor it before we move to the external engagement, but I want to make sure that if there's anything folks want to add in this space around how we communicate and function amongst one another, they can do so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, I'm good with the conversation where it is. Thank you.
Sure, okay. All right, anything else on this before? It sounds like we may be kind of going to wait and see about how we do this moving forward. All right, so, oops, I was doing that. So the next piece of this is really around, that's okay. I keep thinking I have control over things I don't. It's a lifelong problem. It's a lifelong problem. Children, work. Is around how we want to engage externally, and Daniel, this goes to the point that you brought up earlier. We have several bullet points listed on the next slide that are around kind of current practice and some things that we do, and it's a matter of what we want to prioritize and if there's new stuff to add to here. We have had the discussion, and Tracy will work with, I don't know, me or somebody, us, on the site school visit protocol, just to provide some clarity around, again, there's nothing in policy around that, it's really just practice. And so we've kind of adopted some practices from previous superintendents and boards that may or may not work and be the best way for us to move forward. So we'll be working on that.
At another time. At a different time.
Yeah, at a different time, so that we can have something that we can share with board members and say, how does this feel? What does this work, basically?
One of the, can I give an example?
Go for it.
I know you guys, the first bullet, have expressed that this previous practice of a community superintendent has to go with you to a school visit is not working for you, that you feel like you can.
Or just make scheduling hard.
Yeah, it makes scheduling hard, and so we're gonna think about that.
Because I actually enjoy the time I spend here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not the issue.
Yeah.
So we'll work with Matt on some ideas around how other places do this and what makes most sense. And
Can I just say one thing? The reason I was like, not now, because I think we've learned a lot, so we could help
Oh,
some
absolutely.
ideas. But last year, a couple of times I was invited to go to like a faculty meeting, 7 a.m. or whenever they have it, and just the principal would say, we're gonna have a breakfast, you wanna come, and I'll introduce you and you can answer questions. And that has been 100% my favorite way of interacting with schools, because I get to talk to the teachers and the staff, and they can ask questions, and it's informal, and versus the very formal, you go in and sit down and everything is planned and it doesn't feel as real in the same way. So I know both of them have their place, and I wouldn't want to take time from a faculty meeting that needs very much to be done in different ways. So I've only done it by invitation, but I just wanted to say like that as a school board member, it's significantly different to do it those two ways, and it felt so much better to do it this other way.
Yeah.
So, just a word of caution from the department. But what I would say in those situations is certainly would apply under a PG model, and certainly going to agree with you. You want to be very careful to say anything that you express is one member of the board, right? You are not speaking to the board. Having said that, no matter how many times you say, I'm here as one board member, they hear, oh, the board supports that, or the board is against that. So those type of, and then the other thing is, you've got to be really disciplined so that when somebody comes up and says to you, hey Mary, I have this discipline problem and I feel like I'm being treated unfairly, and you go, oh my gosh, let me hear about it, right? You have now inserted yourself into a very specific legal process that were that to be grieved, were that to go through the Texas statutes, were that to finally come to the board for adjudication, you would have to raise your hand and say, I'm sorry, I have to recuse myself, I can't vote on this because I inserted myself in the process. So just
But that happens far more in emails than it would in a situation like this. Like, that's a good word of caution, I think, for how we get emailed and approached one-on-one.
Yeah.
In these settings, it's a good word of caution, but that's much more of a concern for me in those situations.
I've seen it both ways, but yes, it doesn't matter how the request comes to you. It's important that the board members understand you have a role as the final adjudication for your school district. And if you insert yourself into a process, you don't want to be that one that says, yikes, we're getting sued.
But again,
because
that happens a lot, like, that kind of.
Sure, and
So, yeah.
the response would be the same, be an email, would be like, I appreciate you contacting me, I cannot speak to this, here's the process.
Yeah.
I think too, one of the, and this is why I think that the spending some time really digging into what's going to work best, because it's going to be different for each board member. Like, what I prefer as a board member for a school site visit could be vastly different than what Paula prefers or what a future board member would prefer. So trying to figure out what a sort of norming around what a school visit, site visit for a board member could look like. And I don't think it has to be one thing. I mean, I think what we need to do is figure out how do we provide clarity around what that can look like, and then work as a team to make sure that happens. The other part of it that I always want to be careful about is some principals are more comfortable than others with different formats. So there are principals that are like, I would rather you not be in my faculty staff meeting or in a less formal kind of setting. And so just trying to balance what's going to work best for board members individually, but also for that school leader. Which is why I feel like it's a bigger conversation for us all to have. Not that it'll be created and then just given out to board members, but to have a conversation about it with something to respond to. Like, here's a draft of a protocol that we can think about, and now what are some, responses, thoughts, reflections on it so that it can work. Jennifer, sorry, I saw your hand go up.
And that's why sometimes I do feel more comfortable sending a community superintendent with you, or at least that you have that point of contact with them at some point during that day. Because it could even be that a principal will want to engage with you. And I'm just, it is my role and my job to make sure that every arena that I put you in, you are prepped for success, and that you are very cautious with where I send you and how I send you.
Package up.
I guess sorry to belabor this, but like, I feel like there's I don't know what the right way adjective to describe it or verb, but there's a message that we get that we have to be, and I understand the carefulness, but like, it's okay for us to talk to people.
Sure.
It's okay for us to talk to a reporter. It's okay for us to talk to a principal. And every time I feel like I mention it, everyone's like, oh, she's talking to someone. And I just want to remind everyone we're elected officials. We were elected by dozens of people, right? Who tens of thousands of people.
Tens of thousands.
Who want to be able to know that we're listening to them. And so I just want to find a better way in my last 2 years here, I think, that I've had as an experience in my first 2 years here, of trust by the district that I can represent this district and my role in a way that doesn't cause, like, everyone's blood pressure to go up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how I'm feeling at this point, and I feel a little bit like 2 years ago, I didn't know as much or didn't even feel as confident. So I can see there's a learning and there's all kinds of stuff, and I'm just,
Yeah,
a little
absolutely.
frustrated by the interactions that I have to keep having around anyway when I'm talking to people, and so it's a little frustrating.
That's helpful to hear, because that has not been my experience, and so it's helpful to hear that that is yours. So that as we're thinking about these things, because you're absolutely right. I mean, A, you're a grown-ass adult, but B, you're elected to this role and to represent people and lead the district. And so I think it's, well, in my perspective, it's much more about trying to help board members be successful and then make sure it's a good partnership for the school. Like, I'm just thinking about site visits, I'm not thinking about media, which you're also able to talk to whoever you want, I mean, as long as you represent yourself, to make sure that it's something that's going to be the most advantageous thing for us as school board members to understand the schools we're representing and to allow people from the school community to share whatever they want to share with us and to be good listeners and good be present. I don't know, that's my,
And it is different for all of us, I
Yeah.
understand that.
yeah.
Just real quick, I agree with everything you just said. What's incumbent upon this board is to define how that happens.
Right.
Yeah, that's
So
helpful.
that everybody has the sense, so I think that's what I heard from Stephanie
Yeah.
and Tracy, is that we just need to, those norms and agreement kind of needs, again, we get some of that down.
Yeah.
If we were going to put together, I think we're working on a nice binder for new board members. So we talked about school visits and the more typical one of going with the superintendent, community superintendent, the kinds of things that you can expect. But then after that, after you get more comfortable and after you've been there a couple times, I've gone in to see the professional learning centers or whatever kind of little activity they have. And that helped me understand the value of planning time for teachers.
We have relationships that are different with different people. I mean, there are some principals that I know really well, so it looks different when I go visit them than folks that maybe knew or that we're getting to know. So I mean, I think the nuance of that and how we navigate that is we just need some norms around it. Less, to me, it's less about like a strict practice of doing it, and it's more around like here's the goal: get to know your community, and here's some things that may be kind of cautionary, right? Things that you may want to back slowly away from because you don't want to compromise your role as a board member. And then here's the some norms around it so that we can engage in ways that are meaningful, that don't have to be necessarily so prescriptive, but that get to the meat of it, which is we're just trying to get to understand what's happening in schools and be able to represent that as we talk about make decisions. So yeah, I think that's absolutely all right there. I'm on board. I'm on board.
Just asking that for clarification. When you were talking about, when you were saying like, oh, no, you have to be careful that you're representing yourself, on a formal school visit, like you've done, same thing applies?
I would say yes, just because people will hear what they want to hear. So if you go and say, hey, we're thinking about closing your school, right? That's a big red flag. If you say, well, the board had a discussion about this, well, they go, oh, the board is doing this. Well, the board had a discussion. So you just need to, confidentiality is a whole other topic. We can go hours around that, but.
I just wanted to make sure, like, because you were kind of in response to me saying it was like an informal visit, but that applies to even no matter any kind of visit.
I would say, unfortunately.
Any way we interact.
You were a board member
Yeah,
24/7 regardless.
Yeah.
People, so for instance, real quick, I quit going to PTA meetings when I was on the board because people were bringing items to the PTA knowing the board was there. So I just took myself out of that. But yes, regardless of what you're saying, how many times you say it, people hear the board is thinking about this, the board is going to do this.
Yeah, or you walk into a building and you say, oh my gosh, the facilities here are terrible, this is horrible, the carpet's awful, this is this, and it's like, great, that's the pathway, and it's hard, because we're human. Being human is hard, and I mean, I've said some things in visits, and then you're like, well, I didn't mean that's what the board's talking about, that's like my reflection, my perspective, and it's hard to differentiate in these things. But we're also not automaton, I mean, we're not like machines, so we have to be authentic when we go to visits, and they should feel that way, because so it is all relationship development, so we can best represent people, so it's just a weird balancing act. So if folks are okay with that, with like giving some thought to putting some ideas on paper and then being able to respond to that and put down, well, this would be challenging, or we would need more guidance around here, whatever the reflections or guidance is, and then we can agree to it. I think it will be helpful as folks, new board members come on, to have a little bit more clarity around that and then be able to see themselves in it, and then at least you can ask questions when you're responding to something versus not knowing until something happens. And then you get sticky. So, is there anything else around that before we move on? And we don't have to go through all of these pieces, but what I wanted to do is see, like Danielle, you mentioned, the
Like board community
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
If they're not attached to the superintendents, like are we doing our own like we did with 1 year? Or are those just gone for us, you know?
I think last year they got lost because you had so many,
I mean, that makes sense.
right,
We had a lot of public
right,
comment.
public comment
Yeah.
periods and, yeah.
Community meetings.
Yeah.
Closures.
Yeah. But they
But
were,
those
the year
were
before, I
those
think they were,
meetings.
wow.
So is there a way that we can combine, like, when you do your superintendent community meetings, you'll often have other people up there. Is there a reason it couldn't be a board member? So that they're talking about the superintendent and the board at the same time?
I think,
I mean, we're there and they know we're there, you introduce us. so-
yeah, and when you've been there, you've jumped in a couple of times. I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. Matt, do you have thoughts on that? I just think it's hard for you guys to be there talking as an individual board member. And I think there are times where you want me to own things, because it's not the board's role, or, I don't know.
What we, in the past, so there's no like structure around this. So you can create it, like during, as an example, during the blessed COVID years, there were certain board members, and actually Susan and I hosted several things together to be able to listen to community members. A lot of it was on Zoom because we were all on Zoom, and other board members did not. Well, there's a weird imbalance then if like one director from one director district, and you're like, District 3, I'm going to be listening to you every week in this, form, whatever it is. And then other folks are like, I've got nothing happening here. And then I mean, I feel like that's our right to do, to make ourselves available to people however we can. I have an interest though in having more consistency around how we as board members can engage in things like something that is more specific to a board community conversation. Maybe it's called something different, so it's not so we don't have so many redundant things happening, so that there's access for the public to be able to engage with board members in whatever way we would like. But it has been very imbalanced because it's really up to the whim of the director. What if the director comes in and is like, that's not what I want to do?
What I remember early on in December of our first year, going to the articulation area SAC meeting, so the whole thing, and finding out I was on the agenda and they expected me to speak, and it was my first foray out to anywhere.
Oh my God,
You know,
that was terrifying.
It was like, oh, no, I have nothing to say. But that is an area where board members, one's not the first one, when they don't have their feet under them, but eventually being part of those meetings, because I think I like it to listen to what they're talking about and what their issues are, but.
Those don't always happen consistently either.
Right.
That's the other problem.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting, one of the things that's interesting about the superintendent community conversations is it is all kinds of operational things that come up, right? Why are you doing this with start times? What about this curriculum decision? Blah, blah, blah. So what I think could be interesting for you guys in terms of like a town hall is a specific issue at a policy level that you may want to hear from constituents about prior to decision making. I mean, you guys don't want to be up there answering questions about decisions that you want the superintendent to make. Otherwise, you're going to have this slippery slope into I mean, what if you disagree with Stephanie about start times and then you're sitting there talking about start times? It's just
People
awkward.
don't understand policy governance, so they get very frustrated when a board member says, this isn't my department.
Yeah.
And they're like, but you're the board.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is not my
I
department.
mean, I don't want you guys to be, but I need to be the CEO of this organization, and I need to be seen as such. And so, in order to be able to be a sense maker and have people trust and believe that I'm leading what I say is what we're doing, and I'm leading it forward. So, I'm happy to have you guys in these meetings, but I do feel like there's a time and a place for me to have space with the community that I just need.
And then we need a time and space
Yeah.
also.
That's what I
The
hear.
board, that we need to be, because, and there's no reason we shouldn't be able to hear or even field questions about operational stuff. What I mean is, people need to know that we know about those things, that we understand those
Yeah,
things.
sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think there's, I don't know, I think there's something here that we should really think about, because there's a real difference in, like, in Arvada, the elected officials there frequently have Saturday meetings, things like that, and I always go to them, and they always introduce me, and then people will come and ask me questions. So I'm having the most unplanned interactions with community members possible, because I was thinking about it, probably one of the only elected officials in my area that doesn't have a public engagement identity.
You guys did town halls in your first
Yeah,
year.
that's what I'm
Do you
saying,
remember
yeah.
those? And I don't think I was there. I was at maybe some of them, but I don't think I went. Lisa, do you remember these? Didn't you help coordinate them?
Yeah, and we can do those. I think somebody also made a great point that tapping into the structure that already exists may also be helpful because it may help to get people there. So while the individual staff meetings maybe
Might be
not
more
reliable,
The area
but-
staff meetings.
But the area meetings maybe actually, and that's where honestly when we were first organizing Tracy's superintendent chats, we went to the one, the Green Mountain, because they're super organized, and said, hey, will you guys co-host with Tracy? There's no reason why, those happen more often, obviously, than she went, so I think they happen like every quarter or.
They're every month.
Or every month,
I
so
know that.
in Green Mountain, they may be less frequent in other
The
places.
only one I know of.
I know, because I think there's one up in Arvada or the Pomona area, because I know I talked to the ladies who organize up there, but getting maybe time there or having your own, we can definitely get those organized for you, for sure.
It sounds like there's an interest in the board though norming on this and people doing it the same, not the same, but everybody committing to it.
Having opportunities.
I would like to feel more supported.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yeah, then I feel right.
Okay. Yes.
Can I ask so we have an opportunity, I think, to maybe reset this year, the SAC area conversations. So we now have community superintendents that oversee entire articulation areas. We did not have that before,
Correct.
except in Jefferson and Alameda. So to me, this provides an opportunity similar to what is experienced in Green Mountain or down Columbine or over Pomona. Why would we not encourage the first SAC meeting to be, the community superintendent asking the SACs of the elementary and the middle and the high school to join together and then bring the respective district, whatever we are, director, to those meetings.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's an opportunity to really set those SACs in line with what Tara and David have been talking about with the articulation areas. And it kind of, I don't want to say forces the hand, but at least puts some parameters in place that we can start to encourage the different articulation areas to mirror something like Green Mountain or to mirror something like the Columbine. And it's already set then, right? So your community superintendent says, hey, we're going to do the first one in September, and Danielle's coming to this one, and Mary's coming to that one, etc. And so your district rep is going to be there, or your district director will be there. And it's something new that can be just established now with these new articulation area coverages. Just an idea.
Yeah, I like that, because I think that would encourage more people to go to those area SAC meetings, and that's always a good thing. And also, Tracy, my recollection of the effort we had for our own town hall meetings, we had facilitators there. And so the first one I had, I felt like I was just part of the audience. Now, granted, I was new, so I may not have been so comfortable getting up there and, directing it at that point. But it was, this is my town hall, just sitting here taking notes. So that was kind of weird.
It was weird. Okay. Yeah. I think this is great. And if everyone's comfortable with that kind of alignment, and then we can figure out, again, I think there is the similar kind of what board members feel like they need in order to make that successful. So there are some of us that show up and be like, yeah, I really don't need anybody else to talk for me. Like, I got this. I'm good. And have district staff there who, work with the community superintendent, whoever else needs to be there. But wrap whatever support that board member needs, because some board members may want to have a little bit of somebody to lean close to. Be like, can you answer this question, please? I don't know what's going. I don't know if this is my lane or not. To provide support, so the board members do feel like the district is supporting board members, but that it is our opportunity for engagement. I think it's a great idea.
Like, the thing I don't want to do, I've seen some elected officials, like, I don't want to be like, hey, I have open office hours, come, I'll be sitting in the district from 4 to 5, and allowed to do that. I'd much rather have a formal district-supported way that we do community engagement in that way, in our areas, at least,
Yeah. I can only imagine that the DAC co-chairs, and that, I'm just guessing, but that Dave and Tara would be really excited about this alignment, because I think it does help to build the energy and the feeling like your time is valued and useful if you're going to an area staff meeting and your district director is going to be there. It would be great. Yeah, Matt?
So, it's a great conversation. Policy governance would say your engagement with your community, your ownership is a much different thing. So start times is a great example. The board has a duty, according to policy governance, of always deciding when I engage, what is the point, where does it interact with policy? So what Carver talks about with community engagement is the board goes out and says, hey, we're thinking about this, and very targeted input, and listens a lot, doesn't talk very much. Carver, myself, and I agree, town halls are not a great engagement, right? Because it's one of two things. Either the board has made a decision and we'd like you to bless it, or it's amateur night, right? Everybody gets their 3 minutes, and to Tracy's point, somebody's going to stand up and ask you something, and you're not going to have a response, and it doesn't feel comfortable to say, I don't know about that, but I will find out. So it's up to you however you do it. The only thing I would say is you've got a very robust that schedule. Plug into your community engagement. So
The monitoring report is what you're saying?
no, these community engagement
Oh,
pieces.
yeah.
In the first semester, we are going to engage with 6 groups of 10 people each, and we're going to invite those people to come and talk about start times, or we're going to ask them to something that's going to come back to your policy. Then you go and you listen, and you hear all that stuff, and then you come back and have a debate. Here's what the community told us around this end to this goal, and they really like it, they don't like it, we need to do this, right? I understand that there's the desire to, as a politician, and I know that's sometimes a charge.
Dirty word.
Right, for you all to want to be out there and be public. Carver would just ask you, what is the point of that
Yeah.
in regard to how you're going to drive policy?
I think it's a
Well,
great.
well,
So go ahead.
Well, I'm going to push on that a little bit, and I guess the idea of alignment with our community superintendents and our SACs, our critical goal and objective as an education system is to educate our children. Can they read? Can they do math? How are they doing in the science area? And being able to do the alignment with the UIPs, with the elementary, middle, high schools that bring it up to the district level, that then enable us as a board to be able to hear how we need to be reinvesting our dollars in order to address the educational needs of our children, I think is critical, especially right now when we are introducing new curriculum, we're combining schools, we're introducing new math programs. There's a sense of urgency of understanding what is different in an Alameda SAC area versus a Ralston Valley SAC area. And so I understand the Carver, don't go out there and start talking about things that you, from a policy governance perspective, you really have to honor that policy structure. But from a community that we're supposed to be listening to, I think the SAC opportunity provides us that listening forum without us overstepping that line.
And perhaps I didn't
so,
say it as
so-
articulate as
so-
I could, but I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is, if you're going to have a public engagement, how is that information going to come back and help you guide policy? You've already given guidelines to the superintendent. Make sure that we have an appropriate curriculum. Make sure that each area, and she's going to bring you back evidence of that. So how then does that engagement at that level drive that? And you as a board can, because you are the elected, you can do it any way you want. I'm just saying,
Right.
Margaret would ask you to say, what is the point of that and how is it going to improve your policy and the operations of the
I'd like
district?
to answer that, how it would help me.
It's not me that has to answer, you as a board have to
That's
answer
what I'm
that.
saying, so how it would help me is if we say we want a good curriculum and Tracy comes back and says, here are my 3 options, I need to have something that says those are good options or not.
But you already have policy that says the board will have as many diverse viewpoints and information. You can request whatever you want to come. And maybe this is what you're talking about. Maybe that's one way to do it. All I'm asking you is as you do these things, always keep in mind that you are a board driven by policy. And so how does all of this interaction come back and drive your work at the board table via policy?
And I don't think that, I feel like that we're
Kind of
talking
parallel.
about
Yep.
some similar things, that, like Susan, what you mentioned, or Danielle, the example you mentioned, there are policies that align with those questions that we can easily sort of focus on, saying, okay, this is the policy that we're thinking about related to this upcoming decision. And so this is information that's helping us to sort of inform that decision making. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. I think it's just being intentional about saying, here's how it aligns. The other part of it that I'm hearing, it's less from the policy governance side, more from a sort of community engagement perspective, is as a community member, it's like taking a survey. Please don't give me a survey if you're not going to do anything with it. Please don't ask me for to come to a meeting on a Saturday morning and have me tell you something if you're not going to do anything with it. So I think that aligning it with something that is rooted in our governance structure actually allows for that feedback to be meaningful in a different way, because it's like, no, it's more actionable. And I think it will feel more meaningful. And I don't think that means it can't. I actually really like I think it's a great strategic move to align with the area SAC meetings and have that be one of these methods of a board member engagement. Just making it really clear that, yeah, this is the purpose here, is to really listen to and understand the community perspectives around this thing that, according to our governance model is one that we're going to be making decisions on or helping to inform.
And that point is the one that I really would hammer home. Carver would explicitly say, you do that engagement, and you very explicitly say to people, here's what your opinion is going to have. We're going to go back and have this conversation. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to come back to you and say, we instituted this policy, and as a result, the district did this. You don't want it to go into Area 51.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the word of caution that I would have about it is that the feedback that you get in any community meeting is micro feedback. It's not macro feedback. So what you will hear is the people who will come to this, if you say, we're focusing on how school start times are going, the people who will come will be the people who are having issues with it. And it's not that that's not important. It is important, and their issues are important. And we want our operations people to hear about those things and solve those problems if they can. And sometimes the answer is, unfortunately, we just can't make this work for everyone. And I'm so sorry that you're in the group it doesn't work for. And I don't know what to say about that, except it is what it is. But if you look at it on the macro level, what you discover is there's all these people who are not coming to those meetings, who are so thankful that their high school kids started later. And they're just, life is good, life is better now because their kid is going to school in the morning. They're not coming to the meeting to tell me that. And so I think it is important to be available to the public and for them to know that you're available. And this is actually what I kind of like about going to SAC meetings and, or to area accountability meetings. Because you are available. And I think it's important see a trend. If you've got 30 people there all saying, this is a huge problem, it's a huge problem, and you need to know that. So I think that there is value in that, but I think you do have to understand that anytime you're meeting with a small group, you're getting micro feedback. If you want macro feedback, that's where we look at the big data that we gather and what that's telling us.
And just one thing you kind of imposed. John Carver is not the final arbiter for how you all interact.
Right.
Matt Cook is not the final arbiter. Whatever this board agrees, all I'm saying is that you all agree in function and have some fidelity to the policies you put in place.
Yep.
The other thing, and Paula makes a great point, in Colorado, 80% of people that live in your school district have no direct connection to K-12. They don't have a child, they don't have a grandchild, niece, nephew. They may drive by the school and the flag is up and the doors are open. You still have to represent that 80% of those folks. And so that's why this smaller engagement, can be very helpful in being targeted, right?
Yeah.
Not just talking to the booster club and the PTO, but going out and find those people who don't know, right? And so whatever you all do is appropriate because you were the ones that were elected.
Yeah.
I would just ask, always keep it focused. How does this drive my work? How would this relate to a policy? How is this going to make outcomes for students better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, can I summarize what I think, a few things I've heard? Danielle, I think I hear you saying that you have interest in a more structured way to connect with your constituents so that you have their perspective more in mind as you're making decisions as a board member.
Well, the only thing I'd say about that is that I don't know about the word structured as a supported way. I feel like I'll just be really blunt. I feel like the district wants to filter what we feel and see, and the thought of us going out and, it's called CBPR, Community-Based Participatory Researcher. I'm very comfortable with these concepts of community engagement that we're talking about, and I'm not afraid of them. And I think that getting multiple views, I get it, a certain kind of people show up at certain meetings. I really get this. I spent 20 years building a research agenda around that way and trying to think of how are we not hearing what we should or not, or what we should, what are we not hearing? So I guess I'm just speaking out finally saying I don't want everything to be filtered through what the district wants me to hear about something. I actually want to hear what other people want to say about it as well. I would like the district not to be worried about me going and sitting in
When
places.
you say the district, do you mean me?
No, it's just the whole institution, I guess. Any time that anything comes up where a school visit or reporter or a community meeting, maybe shouldn't be at the community conversations. It's just, or that there's not a role for us there.
I'm not sure I said that we shouldn't be at the community I would actually prefer you to be at the community conversations if you can.
I think one of the things that and this is again, I guess just differences in person. I would just tell people, no. If someone says, hey, we're gonna write a script for you, 95% of the time I say, no, thank you. I'm not doing that. It's in our purview to be this is how I want it to look. So I feel like some of this too, maybe the norming around, we are empowered as board members to say, I would like for the district to help me set up these things. I don't need a facilitator. Here's what I want it to be on. There's some agency.
That's not what I'm saying. I don't think that we don't need facilitators or.
No, well, that was an example. What I'm saying is the speaking up part, that's what we have to be doing. If you feel being
it's a cultural thing, I think, is what I'm talking
because
about.
I don't feel the same way. I don't think it's a cultural issue. From my perspective, it's not.
Sure.
So I think part of this is how comfortable, when do we feel empowered to push and say, that's actually not the way I want to see my engagement look or whatever. Don't take the specific examples of that. So what I'm trying to figure out is how to make sure it's articulated that there's district staff here to support us as board members to make sure we get what we need and want. Some of that is very unique to who we are as individuals. Some of it needs to be more consistent so that we are allowing for these opportunities for engagement and all of that. So I'm trying to figure that out.
So there's different ways that we're comfortable. I
Absolutely.
agree with with that. So I'd rather have much more formalized, I think, kind of ways that it's clear that this is the way that we can, but I still want to be accessible, and I still want to have conversations with people.
Sure.
So I get it, we
Yeah.
have different approaches.
Lisa, did you have something you wanted to add or discussion?
I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys can't see me, but I wanted to address the issue of the media. Because I think sometimes what you guys can't see is that when we get a media request, like we got one last week, actually they sent it to all of you, and they sent it to, or a lot of times they send it to all of you, and they send it to our comms department. So when we write back and say, hey, we've gotten this taken care of, or if you, it would be helpful for us also if you wrote, it is helpful for us to know like what's being asked out there, so if you let us know, and then say, you know, we can help you if you'd like, or, you know, if you need materials from us, or to let you know, like, oh, we've been asked that actually, and here's like how we're going to approach answering it. But I think you have the right to speak on your own behalf to the media, and many of you do that.
Well, I'll bring up an example because, there was a media request to speak to me about something I had put on my Facebook. And as you can attest, I was livid. And boy, did I want to talk to the media about that. And that is no time to be talking to the media. And I absolutely could have calmed down. And I absolutely could have presented myself well on that. I have no question about it. And I would have felt free to say to Lisa, I have given this a great deal of thought and I'm speaking to that reporter. Nobody can stop me from doing that. Try it.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I could have. I talked to my family. It says
Your advisors.
Well, there's a lot to be said for talking to millennials, honestly, about how they perceive the media and getting a different perspective, because it is a very different perspective. And it was ultimately my daughter and my son-in-law who said, do not feed this monster.
Yeah.
Do not do it. And here's why it is a monster, and here's why what you are talking about will only feed it. And that is why I called Lisa back and said, I'm still with it, but I understand, and I'm opting not to speak to this reporter. But I did not feel like I couldn't do it.
You may have been advised by us that it might not be in your best interest.
And I wasn't worried about my best interest.
Yeah.
Necessarily. Well, and I don't.
Because that is oftentimes what's our viewpoint is like, we're trying to help you be the best you can be, and if it doesn't feel like that,
Well,
it's okay,
and being genuinely productive.
But you can push back.
Like being productive on behalf of students and understanding how ultimately me getting pissed off about me is not productive to students. And that's really where all of that was. And being able to step back and say, I have to remember that people ultimately don't care about me.
right?
And that's cool. And I didn't do this to be about me. And so, you gotta step back sometimes. But if I had felt like it was in the best interest of students and the best interest of this district for me to talk to that employer and clarify, I would have done it. Even if you had said, okay, you're doing this against advice, but I can't stop you.
And I think this is where our roles, so like I think one of the protocols or practices we may have established is just give Stephanie a heads up if you're going to be speaking, like even if
Not for permission.
not for permission, just like so no surprises. So you can say like I spoke to this reporter about this, or I'm planning to, and then if we are having a conversation, I'm always going to speak to what I think is the best interest of the school district.
Right.
And you may believe you have that same interest, and we may not always agree. And that's okay. I mean, and ultimately, you can speak on your own behalf. As Stephanie says, you're a grown person, and
I didn't say that.
you
We have
have
to
to. Right. You can.
Right.
But you can make a choice to speak out or not. And we're going to share. Like my role is to share with you what I think is in the best interest of the district. Your role is to do whatever you feel is in the best interest of the district and you as an elected official. If that makes sense.
I'm wondering too if, because I've messed this up with, I've given media reports and then forgotten to share that I did that, and I've apologized to people about that because at the end of the day, you just don't want to be surprised by like, whoa, what did you just do? And I've been guilty of that, not against, well, Yes, it was a blunder. We all make mistakes. Okay, but what I'm wondering is if this is part of, I mean, for us currently, but I'm always thinking about like the next iteration of this board, and then the one after that, and the one after that, how we can help to clarify. And again, I know it's probably people are exhausted hearing the term norming around things, but because we have policy around this, right? But it's not very, the nuance of it, that's always where it gets sticky. Like none of us have to ask for permission, but we do need to inform. So, but we also should feel empowered to speak on behalf of ourselves or issues that we care about as an individual board member when that's appropriate. So I mean, some of it's like the gray area is a hard place to live in, but I don't ever want board members to feel like they're being gagged from speaking about things that.
I don't think any of us do. We don't know. We can. I just think we don't want to have an adversarial relationship about it.
Oh.
So like, I feel an obligation to have our conversation publicly. I feel an obligation to listen to our constituents. These are my role. I feel an obligation to ask questions as a board member. These are my role that is different than if I was any other person in this room. These are my board member obligations. And so this, for me, falls into that obligation of making sure that I'm listening to the people who are impacted by the policies that we are enacting. And so I agree. I know I can do whatever I want, but I don't want to do it in a rogue. I don't want to be rogue. I don't want to be a dysfunctional board. I don't want to have an adversarial. So I'd rather just say this now and say, but I don't. I need multiple filters for making votes, and making decisions.
Sure.
It just can't always be the district filtering everything for me.
Yeah.
That's what's important to me. That's what I feel is my obligation as an elected official, as a board member in this district, and to do that in partnership with the district.
So I wonder if in that, because I completely agree with you, and I wonder if toward that end, some of these next steps, so around sort of on a more microcosm level of the school visits and that relationship and communication and partnership or relationship building, not just with school communities, but also with the community superintendents, because those are sometimes different perspectives that come from that one kind of area. Thinking about moving forward with the board engagement through area SACs and getting that formalized for this year, if we can. I don't see any reason why. I'm saying next time I'm not the one that schedules them, but I don't see any reason why we can't do that.
Like they all exist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or creating them if they do not exist as two pieces, and then we can talk about. So I think a couple of these other ones, which is around engaging with other elected officials, which is another sort of broader community wide level engagement, and then we'll talk with Ed around legislative agenda and positioning. If it moves us toward, it's not the solution, but it is moving us toward feeling like we have a more formalized, not structured, but formalized way of getting the kind of layers of perspective that help to inform. Because I completely agree with you. That's part of our job. Yeah.
That may also be just that you guys create shared agreements around some of these things and like commitments. And so we can think about helping you put something together to share with the board. And I mean, one of the things that I care about is that we know. That's all, right? I mean, because it's like, you just need to know where you are, what you're doing, who you're talking to, so that, if you come back to me and say, I heard this, I can be a sense maker for you.
I had two thoughts. One was around the last email that I got from a media, the Politico, I think, about the homeschooling thing. And I'm thinking that it would be helpful if we were free. I could just, if I wanted to, respond from my own perspective from what I know about homeschooling in my district. But I could then say, for a more comprehensive view or the district's position or for someone who has more detail, please contact. So I can have a response that always directs them to the communications department or the district's communications, but also allows me to give some of my own personal.
I'll tell you what I would prefer, but again, the board can, make a decision. Because what worst case scenario will be like everybody responds to it, and we don't know, and we respond to the media with conflicting information. So I think it will be helpful for you to say, I got this media request. I would like to respond to it. Like I plan to do that do you know if anyone else is responding to this or got it? Now, again, you don't have to, that's like my way of, like, I'd like to be organized, and because sometimes what happens, and it has happened continuously through the last year, one of you will do a media interview and the district will get a call from the media asking us to respond to what you have shared. So they want to comment now from the district on what the board member has shared. So we've dealt with those as they have come up. But it's better if we have time and it seems like, oh, this is like a district-wide issue. It doesn't just apply to my area. But you're saying, like, I would actually like to respond with my perspective. I prefer that we are coordinating that. That's just my preference in the way that, from a district perspective, that I'd like to see happen. But again, you all are, you have some autonomy here, so.
Yeah, and it's a little bit messy because we have freedom to do all these things. It's a matter of, one, making sure that we have, information that's correct going out, because I don't want to be sending something out and then it's like, one of you is like, that's not right. Oh gosh, I was going to say something, never mind. So maybe what we can think about is, because I also don't want any board member ever to feel like they are hampered in being able to authentically engage and share perspectives or concerns or like whatever, any of those things. But I always want the district to know what's going on, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that respond to what we put out there. It's always coming back here. And I don't ever want to be the person or the board that's like making the district look bad. And that doesn't mean whitewashing things that are problematic or challenging, but it just means at least being on the same page with, here's the information that I'm putting out there so that everyone can be prepared and ready to be able to respond to it.
We don't want to be in a position where we have to respond to the media that one of you has provided inaccurate information that also doesn't, like, we would do everything we could to try to avoid that, especially if it's facts and figures based.
Yeah.
Well, I also am conscious of, I don't want to ever get the reputation that I never respond.
Sure.
So, send something to her, she never responds. So even if my response is, thank you for your request, I forwarded it to our communications.
CC'ing Lisa on it.
Yeah, whatever kind of thing, so that we.
That's just something that's.
Yeah, I'm like, you deal with it.
Yeah, she's always like, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
It's up to.
Yeah, unless it's something that I feel really strongly, which in the past I have, of saying, I'm responding to this, and sometimes I forget, but then other times I do inform other people. But I guess that's the policy.
And then just one quick thing, the constituents, along with Matt was saying, that 80% of our voters, the population in Jefferson County doesn't have students in schools, but we rely on them for our bonds and
Absolutely.
low overrides and everything, so it's important that they know what the school district's doing.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to figure out ways, like the SAC committees, I really like it, the area SAC, but that doesn't reach a wider community.
That's who shows up to our, the
Property
Yes,
disposition.
for
Yeah.
property, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
You're like, hey,
Because they live there.
Because they're aging in place. So let's, for right now, if it's okay, because there's work to do in this space. And we have 3 sort of actionable next steps that we'll work on for this school year to be implemented and or things to share with the board to be able to respond to and move forward. But there's more to do, because I want to honor the time that we have here, especially since Ed showed up and moved to the legislative agenda position piece. But I want to flag anything that is really important, like for me, as an example, this engagement with elected officials, and given the work that we're doing with property disposition, but beyond that, with some of the demographic stuff going on and how interconnected all of this work is, that we need to be having that consistent, ongoing work, be collaborative. It's going to take longer than I think we allotted here, but I want to flag it to make sure that we can come back to it. If not today, then think about how we can elevate that, or any other piece. That's just my thing on here that I want to make sure, so that we can come back to it and not just brush over it, because I think it's going to help with
a lot of the upcoming work that this district will be doing to focus on that piece. We just don't have, I just want to make time. Is that okay with everyone? Susan, is there anything else you wanted to, before I sort of jump ahead a little bit?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, so on the slides, there's another slide that goes back and references the CASB, the kind of constituent.
It's in the book,
Yeah, and it's in the folder as well. But we're going to jump to the 2024 legislative agenda, and we have a copy of that. I'm trying to get to it in here. In our packets. Do you mind handing me the little slide thing? No problem. And welcome, Ed.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you for the invitation. to
Take a
come.
seat, any seat. How was your summer?
Going very well, thank you.
Good. Oh, that's right, it's still happening.
A much more pleasant time of year
Yeah, for your life,
for
this
those
is great.
holidays. Yes.
So the legislative agenda is just a couple tabs in. So what I thought we would do, so if you look at the legislative priorities, and I'm really excited that we're able to talk about it now in advance of the legislative season starting, and Ed can kind of fill us in on some of the things, maybe trends or things that you're hearing bubbling up, if anything. It may be way too early, I don't know. But to review and look at the categories, the primary things that we focused on for 2023. So responding to declining enrollment, school funding efficiency and effectiveness, financial priorities, grant programs, school finance rewrite, and then the accountability system redesign. So some of these things may be left on the list and not moving anywhere. Some of the things may be ones in which we feel like we want to move them off of the priority list moving forward and put something else that may be emerging or something that's happening. And then we also have this fall, the Delegate Assembly for CASB will be meeting in October in Glenwood Springs. And are any of you going to that? Okay.
I think I'm gonna be there the first day. I'm not sure about the second day.
Okay, and Mary's going. I think Susan's talking about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I signed up.
Okay, great, awesome. So we'll have a good Jeffco contingency at the Delegate Assembly. And so that's obviously CASB's legislative platform. So we have some of those things we can kind of borrow from and see what percolates and rises up for the statewide platform level. But I wanted us to open it up and if there's any sort of opening comments. Sounds very formal, that's not what I mean. But things you want to make sure are on our radar as we talk about what this could look like as we shape it for the 2024 legislative agenda.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good morning, and to address the topic that came up a few minutes ago about the new method for determining students that are at risk, the state is in the process of transitioning to what most people believe will be a much more comprehensive measurement for students that are at risk, to get away from the old proxy of free lunch, and then a few years ago it was changed to be free and reduced lunch. The state will use a formula that is, for lack of a better term, stacks various indicators. So students who are homeless, students who have children, students who are in other categories, combined with students who come from families who qualify for Medicaid. And that last one has proven to be the toughest thing because we don't always have Medicaid data by district, we have it by county. And when you get so many students who cross county lines or districts that are, many districts obviously that are part of one county, it's hard to try and figure out which students belong to which districts, which students who are in families that qualify for Medicaid belong to which districts. But I think they're anticipating that they can roll this out for next year. It was supposed to be for this year, but that will be for next year, which I don't know that it will change. It will probably be more comprehensive and change the identification of those students who are at risk across the state. I don't know that it would hurt or harm one district more than another.
We'll have to pay attention to that,
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, I was just thinking about impact for Jeffco. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if it will.
Is there a way we can gather that data for our applicants?
We'll work on.
Yeah.
It's on our radar.
Yeah.
I know as we're going into the session, and
Yeah.
we can probably run some numbers based on our assumptions.
Yeah, and the legislators have said if there are wide changes for any of the districts, the state ought to hold harmless, at least for a while, those districts as we transition to this new model. But it's hard to know what those districts would be. But that's one of the things that's going on. The other thing that I've been waiting for is the school finance task force, which it was announced on Thursday, I think, that the first meeting will be a week from Tuesday, the 29th or so. A virtual meeting just to have kind of pick a chair and schedule some additional meetings. They're not going to do a lot in that meeting, but it has been very slow in getting started. And they have a midwinter deadline, so they need to finish all their work this fall. So that will be quite busy. If you look at all of the things they have been tasked doing, it is pretty lengthy. The purpose of the task force is to examine and make recommendations concerning the formula to make it simpler, less regressive, which I don't even know what that means, more adequate, understandable, transparent, equitable, and student-centered. Now, if they can come up with changes that do all those things, they ought to get an award. It is great to throw all this stuff in and say, you guys go do it. I don't know how they're going to do those things. Having said that, one of the things that is in our legislative agenda is around enrollment. And that has been something that is always at the top of lots of people's lists to get rid of the multi-year averaging or to scale it back. And when we have responsive to declining enrollment, that is something that the task force will look at. Now, the task force doesn't have any legislators. It has a bunch of K-12 people from districts and schools, and then a bunch of people from other K-12 advocacy organizations. And then they present the report back to the legislature on this. When I was sitting in the back there, I looked and saw how many districts right now this year are in a declining enrollment position. And there are only 20 that are not in decline. Now, that has to do in part to COVID. It has to do in part to the rollout of preschool, where some students were moved from district preschools into the state's preschool program. But there's also a lot of districts that are in declining enrollment just because of demographic changes. Almost all of the rural districts are in declining enrollment. And then obviously we are in some of the other larger metro area districts because of economics, demographics, and other things. So any change that this task force recommends will impact a lot of districts. But that is something that they will. There's two primary areas of focus. One is enrollment and the other is cost of living. And the cost of living has been something that has been a target for lots of legislators for a lot of years. And you start tinkering around with those, and Jeffco's funding could be impacted. And well, I want to say this carefully. I represent Jeffco. I want to do what's right for Jeffco. I'm not interested in some sort of game to the formula that would advantage Jeffco, but it needs to be fair to everybody. But I represent Jeffco. Right now, if you rank the 178 districts on their per pupil funding, we are at 148. We are, and a lot of the larger districts, Douglas County is below us, Littleton is below us. You start tinkering around with cost of living, all of us will move closer towards the bottom, which raises the question, one could ask of the task force, if you want to make these changes that move these large suburban districts and suburban/urban districts down towards the bottom, you're basically saying we think you're overfunded compared to everybody else, compared to the majority of the districts. And I don't see that right now. So,
Well, then how do they expect us to attract employees if we cannot see them what it costs to live in the district where they work?
that is exactly the question. If not cost of living, then what? How will we get the money or attract the employees to provide the education? And it has been an easy tagline to throw out there saying we ought to get rid of or scale back cost of living. Now, there's other problems with the cost of living factor, one of them being that it hasn't been fully updated since 1994, so the data hasn't even been recalibrated. Well, that's a different issue, but anyway, but that's exactly the challenge. If some of the cost of living rankings are still in use, they've never fully updated. They do a study every 2 years, and your district can move if you're above a certain threshold. You can never go down. It's a very clunky formula, and the formula probably needs to be changed. But that's different than should we have this, how do we compensate districts so they can hire staff?
And who's responsible for writing those?
The Legislative Council supervises the study, and then the statute directs how Legislative Council comes up with the factors. But it's really a statutory thing. And you get into some crazy things where a resort district may go up 20% in 1 year in their cost of living, and then down 10% and then 2 years later, just because that's the nature of the resort economies in these small mountain towns. But if you can never go down, then you end up with some kind of crazy things like that. So, yeah. Yeah.
These are just great examples of why some of us have said, I mean, it's such a catch-22 because we really do need to visit a very old and antiquated finance formula for school funding in Colorado. And it's an incredibly, if not impossible thing to do without more funding. It's just going to be politically incredibly challenging to take the same pie and slice it in a different way.
And last spring's small modification to the proposed School Finance Act, where lots of people said this can't go forward and they pulled it back, is an illustration of that. And so I don't know if the task force will have any greater success in that, but I've talked a lot to Brenna about this, and Brenna and I are going to be very focused on the task force.
How big is the task force?
I think it's about 20 individuals, and
You can see the list of people on CD's website.
And is their role is to provide recommendations
yes,
to the legislative council?
back to the legislature, back to the House and Senate Education Committees.
By a certain time.
Yes, I think it's January 30th, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Late for making new policy.
Yeah.
So would that inform then the spring legislative season?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yes. So there could
Maybe, or it's too late, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is one of the things that we've been saying over and over again, and DASC is paying close, this is one of DASC's major legislative issues to pay attention to and really try to lean into this year. One of the things we've been saying is, we're already working with our associations, negotiating salary increases, which are 85 to 92% of our budgets, and these late session decisions on school finance really put us in a bind, and they're not okay, because they put us all on hold. It's not fair to our teachers, it's not fair to our staff and our staffing efforts to recruit, retain people, especially in hard to serve positions. So we've been getting a lot of feedback about that, but
What hamstrings us from our fiduciary responsibility is that until June, very difficult.
Because the teachers feel like we're being disrespectful by not talking salary earlier in the process, and it's like, but we don't know what we're getting.
yeah, like that's a placeholder, it's not authentic, you're right. I mean, you don't know what it is, it's like, there's been X in it. We make some assumptions, but.
Should we expect that there will be a change? Or like, this is at that now, are they aiming to change this formula this year?
I think some people would like to do that, but there have been, I think, Matt can correct me, 5 or 6 years of International Finance Act. Now, some of the things they've done are increasing the budget for special education and this new at-risk measure that I think a lot of people say are probably very good, positive changes. But once you start getting into enrollment, cost of living, and some of the other things, those are going to be harder. Another challenge is the way they set up the membership of the task force. They said, we're going to have 3 superintendents. One who represents a district that has higher than the statewide average on at-risk, one who's rural, and one who represents a district that has lower than the average of wealth per district. There's a superintendent from Venice who used to be, whose name I can't remember, CFO is from Denver, and Brenna knows that individual. So,
Okay.
Do you think we can, this is a little, totally different, can we count on doing a positive one?
yes, so the good news is, and I should start with good news, the good news is the way they set up the school finance last year, they said by law, there's no BS factor after this year. So I think if I remember correctly, it's $140 million. So for next year, they need to come up with inflation plus $140 million, and then the BS factor is dead. Now, there's a scenario you can come up with where they change the law, they extend that, but still right now, and I know that there are legislators who say that they will not let anybody change the law. They want this to be the last year, and we move on. Then we move on to a little bit of the gray area, because then what? Now, the first step is let's get rid of the BS factor, but what happens in 25, 26 when we have time to figure that out? And that may relate to Prop HH, which is a whole different discussion. Yes, declining enrollment and cost of living are going to be key issues for this year. And responding to declining enrollment, I think that still needs to, I'd recommend it still needs to be part of your legislative agenda.
So,
Yeah, sorry, do you recommend like what we did last year with the resolution? I think, sorry.
I think we just issued the legislative priorities.
That's right.
Yeah.
You said it was right, so I forgot. Should we do that again this year? I mean, we'll have 2 new board members, and establish. Was that good?
Is it helpful?
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
you guys want to read it?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't care.
I think yes and no. I mean, I think that in the last few years, and it's up to you if you want to do this again, I know that there'll be an election, but we've had a breakfast at Warren Tech for the school board and all the legislative delegation. And this year, that would be, I'm assuming it would be after the election, just because you're having 2 new board members,
Yeah.
but that's up to the 5 of you. And that's a good place to talk about these issues. Now, there's a little bit of a timing problem in that you get potentially new board members on, and you've already established your legislative agenda.
That's right.
But I think that's the best thing to do, just because you have the legislators there.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I
wonder,
represented there.
Yeah.
because I think we didn't have this one until after that breakfast, it was in January, so.
Yeah, we
one
went
of
to
the-
our first year.
Yeah, one of the goals then would be to formalize, like, what stays, is there anything that we want to change? I mean, there's language in here about things that have already happened with this act, but there may be other areas we want to just beef up and refresh or add, I don't know if they're new things, but, and have this as more of a, it's been a little bit more of a, introduce yourself and what are you working on this year kind of thing, versus what I think could be a more structured conversation around, here's the legislative priorities for this district and from this board, and here, let's talk about impacts and what this looks like, or something more structured.
Would that have to be a public meeting then, if we're talking about?
It's posted, I think, anyways.
Oh,
Yeah, we post those, it's noticed.
Okay.
And so anyone who can show up,
Because that
should
sounds
come
like
and
a
eat food for free, but we could be there.
Because in the past, we haven't really talked about any policy.
No, but
Because
we
we
haven't
might
had
do
it.
that, so,
Yeah, I mean, on my tenure on the board, and I don't know if Susan remembers differently than I do, but this 2023 was the first time we had, I know we remember, like something more formalized, like take this, and I'm sure there has been in the past,
Gone back a few years, yeah.
but it was before my time, so I'd like for it to be something that's more proactive
Yeah.
in terms of talking points and how we then, going back to that municipal engagement, even that's different from the legislative priorities, but I do think talking about, like, here are the very specific issues that the board is looking at and figuring out where are those synergies with our municipal partners. Like, I think all of these things will create stronger through lines so we can understand what we're trying
And
to
I
do.
like it as guidance because I do call my legislators when something's important for us, or I meet with them, and I would like to have the one voice, guideline that we come up with as a way to do that. So.
Yeah. And I think it could still be in November, I mean, it'll be after the elections and
Warren Tech breakfast.
the Warren Tech breakfast. Yeah, but it is before the peaceful transfer of power that happens.
Should we do the warrant articles later,
Huh?
instead of doing it before that?
I worry we just have a harder time getting people in December and then January during the session. You know, you can present a legislative agenda at that point, knowing if you have new board members, it can be modified if people want to modify it, and then you can send that out. But at least add a warrant tech breakfast, you almost get about 6 to 8, not every legislator, there's always going to be a few conflicts, but at least you have a good core group there, and you can talk through the priorities.
I do think it's something legislators like.
Yeah.
This is good food and it's important. Tech and it's cool with students, it's, you know. So I don't know if that's already in process of being, like a date being chosen or not, but it may be helpful to get set. Oh, is it?
Well, we put it before we were sworn in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like elected but not sworn in. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, first year. Because swearing this, that doesn't have until December 6th, really late this year. December 6th around one. December 6th is when we have the ceremony.
Right, I was just saying for us.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe it's not scheduled.
No, it's not scheduled.
I don't
but I
think
know
it has
we
been.
haven't been sworn in yet.
I don't think
Veronica
so.
said we went and scheduled it.
I think it was close to the election date. We knew you,
Because I don't think other candidates are there.
No, but it was after the election.
But before swearing in. It's in that bubble time.
I do, I remember
Yeah.
all of us introducing ourselves as school. So then for the old ones?
I think old is the appropriate.
Season,
Former.
Soon to graduate. Yeah.
Season.
successfully graduated.
Matriculated board members. Yeah. So
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't, it's fog. Yeah, so we'll work on getting that scheduled. I think that time frame is good because then we can have new folks there to hear, listen to all those things and of what's created essentially by this board. And then obviously you guys can do whatever you want for that tweaking it. But I think it'd be great to have it as a more focused talking point, something to share with legislators. So we'll work on getting that scheduled. Is there anything else from, Matt, when you had stepped out of the room, I also mentioned that, I mean, there will be some from delegate assembly and from what comes out of CASB for CASB's legislative platform that we may want to borrow from and think about. And I like the way CASB does it actually with the sort of these things are not changing. These are our static resolutions that, which this is less formal than resolutions, but essentially saying like, you know, if it's student focused, like all the things that you are not going to be like, oh, that we're changing that this year, and then add on like for this time and place, these are the things that we really want to be attempting to. So as things come up that may influence or impact Jeffco or as board members, I just want to make sure that we're capturing those, not in a exhaustive document, but something that we consistently share with people for what we're focused on. And it may be something that's presenting in here around, I mean, I don't know, I could think of other things. And I'd like to have this be on an agenda before that, so that we can vote on it.
Okay. Jennifer, did you capture that? If they want this legislative platform, Stephanie wants the legislative platform to be on the agenda
Before we meet with legislators.
before we meet with legislators.
So I don't know when the November meetings are, when the scheduling will happen, but just so that it's something that's formalized and we've been able to talk about it in public.
And it allows this board to set it too, and then to be revised as necessary with
New input. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else either from your perspective or Matt, jump into it, jump in from Cassie's perspective that we may want to just have on our radar as we move into open season's not the way to say it, but new time legislators. Thank you.
you know, just connecting back to the conversation that you had about board engagement with the community. Interestingly, during my superintendent community meetings last year, several legislative issues came up. And it might be an interesting purpose for the board in at least a portion of your community conversations, whatever we're going to call those, the SAC meetings, to talk about some of these issues on your legislative agenda. So so that you can say to legislators, in my stakeholder engagement meeting, we talked about school finance, and this is what our people want our legislators to know about school finance or about school accountability, right? I mean, being able to say that I was in a meeting with 16, 20, whatever, 30 parents who said to me, we've had enough of all this testing. You know, we understand the need for it, but when is what we're doing too many minutes, right, or too many hours? As an example, I just think that could be really interesting for you guys as you continue to advocate for some legislative interests that the board has identified. Could be part of what you talk about with people. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else about this piece? And it sounds like we've got some good next steps to get stuff scheduled and get hopefully what's helpful to you as you advocate on behalf of Jeffco. All right. Hopefully you'll say it needs much.
Happy to stay.
Yeah. I mean, you want to say all day long with us. Just one quick thing, and then we'll take a break, get lunch, and then come back to do the last couple hours. But just wanted to share this, and I appreciate Lisa putting this in here. So, you know, we've initiated the across the board last year as again, I always say it's like the first ever because I don't know what happened in the past, but in my time, way of us communicating more cohesively as a board as one other channel through which we can help keep folks informed. And I don't know what the list is this goes out to. I mean, it's not just Jeffco parents, it's really quite broad, which I think is helpful. And I've received really positive feedback about, it's really nice to be able to find stuff in one place. I was quite impressed when I saw this slide that people are engaging through this. I know it's a newsletter, so like not the most exciting thing to talk about newsletters, but it is serving a purpose. I feel like it's done a good thing, and it's not surprising the top pick stories makes perfect sense for what people are most interested in. And granted, we initiated this in a year where there were a lot of changes to the district, and so I think that may make the engagement really high. But I don't know, Lisa, if there's anything you wanted to say about this, or Jennifer, or as board members, if there's anything that you would like to see change and how, because this obviously is not, it'll continue on to whoever is next for issuing it, but any thoughts about it or things you'd like to see different?
I'll just say that this open rate is really, really, really high. I mean, when you, like if you just get something in your typical newsletter in your inbox, like industry average is like under 20% for sure. So I think people are reading it, and in that way we try to be, we try to keep it as brief I think as possible, provide people something that they can look at, skim to find like they might be looking for and hear about something important for the board if they aren't tuning into the meeting. Then they're clearly understanding what the board is talking about. So.
What is also, sorry, go ahead.
Although the click rate's really low, so what that tells us is that whatever is in that first message is what pretty much all they're reading. So we should, rather than maybe making it as short and concise as possible, make sure anything that's really important to us ends up in the message of the email that they're not clicking through. So just paying it, that is a really high open rate, but it's only for the email. So making sure like the message that you're writing is that's what they're reading, or reading the first line. But yeah.
Is the average audience count the distribution list or the other?
That's the distribution list. So about half of those folks are actually opening it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big universe of 45,000. Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think, again, like it's part of a broader strategy, right? We've been talking about all morning around how we engage in different ways to make sure that we're both getting perspective from different places, but also making ourselves accessible and getting information that's important to folks out there. That the number of times it'd be like, yeah, that we talked about that with whatever issues coming, someone's upset about it. I never heard about this, and suddenly it's appeared out of nowhere, and you're like, or for the last year we've been talking about it, but whatever. I don't respond that way. But being able to not say like, go to board docs,
which is what I would always say before. I could barely navigate board docs, and then to have the expectation that that's where that people would find things. But I do appreciate that it's so much more accessible to community members. Like there's the state demographer's report, and that I feel like more and more of that information is living on the district website, whether it's in this current iteration or if it's going to be a different website in the future. That those different places where people can find things, I really appreciate that we're making it easier for folks to access. I mean, it makes all of our jobs easier in some ways to be able to have people able to have more control over how they can find things.
Well, look at the highest click is on district calendar. Who knows if it's February that people click on, or it was that particular month, because December, January, people love, so maybe that's the case.
Right, they're like,
But February, the district calendar is on our monitoring report.
I can't.
Not a lot of clicks.
It's all me.
Even though those are the top clicked.
Yeah,
I love this. I think it's really interesting.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think it's great, and it's, again, just to reiterate the different ways that we can, with a lot of district support, make sure that we're trying to keep people informed about the work of the board in a way that's useful to them. So I just wanted to make sure we saw that, so. I mean, I didn't do it, but yeah, for everyone's sake.
I think you actually
Initiated it, but I will tell you, I don't want it. I know, I'm a ghostwriter. Her name's Lisa. She's not a ghost. Okay, so we're gonna take a break and get food and take care of whatever needs to be happening, and then we'll come back and move into the last section, which is really priority setting and some transition planning around implementing board members and how we want to think about, as this iteration of the board, what we're focused on and really digging into this year. And thanks, Ed, for being here. And yeah, definitely get food and break. Okay, perfect. So really for the last part of the time that we're here together, it's looking at what's coming up ahead. So thinking about board agendas and what we want to prioritize and think about or take action on as a board between now and when we know we're going to have a transition of 2 seats in December when we formally turn over. And then thinking a little bit about how to be, well, I won't say more strategic or thoughtful because maybe it was those things, but as we onboard to new people, what are some of the things that as lessons learned at one time being new board members ourselves that we want to learn from and include and make sure integrated. I know Jennifer, and I don't know who else is working with you on this, but is working on something like this, but for a board transit, for a new board member onboarding. We want to make sure that we have our perspective as well, because we've been in this before, and Lord knows we know that first CASB meeting in Broadmoor as a newly elected board member is slightly overwhelming for the first, well, I'll say year for me, but that's okay. So the first thing to talk about, and this is written itty bitty, but it is the very first pages that are in your my hot pink binder, your binder, whatever color, which is really laying out what has been identified for August, September, October, and November for known things we know that are either needing to be addressed or we have, as a board, said we want to have these reports before Susan and I are off the board when that transition happens. So I want to make sure everyone's had a chance to look through this outline, because if the board is okay with what's listed here and what we have, and we can certainly, if there, as we brainstorm other topics, think about where those fit in and where we want to prioritize, but this is what we have as a draft, then it would really take the place of agenda setting for until the transition. And then the new board president can come in and do agenda setting in whatever way makes no sense. But trying to make it so that we are, both as a board for the community and also for district staff, giving a bit more lead time to get things prepared, to make sure we know what's coming up. Obviously, the monitoring report schedule is a big part of what goes onto our board agenda, so that's really content rich. And we have that mapped out.
But this takes away that sort of every month, and then, okay, now district staff has 10 days to get all the materials loaded into board docs, so that we can be more thoughtful about a longer term approach that may be more strategic and where we can share, hey, this is coming up, we know what's gonna happen, and it's less, well, what we probably feel like week by week for what needs to be prepared for district staff time as well.
And there are things I think that can be added, occasionally, like already August 24th, we've added ESSER update for the board. But I think it doesn't contemplate that if there are issues that the board wants to discuss, they can talk to Stephanie about that and add it, right?
And I've added a few things that we've been talking today. So you talked about the legislative agenda study in November. So to put that in, this is a document we're talking about and keep you updated on. To see if it changed in any way. One thing in December, the monitoring report schedule, having that for us is great too. We've also in conversation realized that packaging needs in order that makes sequential sense, meaning like there are some monitoring reports sort of hit on some of these things. Packaging those so you receive them in the same month. We've made some of those adjustments already, and we'll propose making it a few more just so that it feels like all the information you want is together.
Is there a spot they compared the box, so are we getting everything on
High school. It is.
You're like, there's too many.
I wouldn't know to call it box, we know it.
October 4th study session, we're going to have some principals come and
Just talk about that for a minute, because I keep like thinking something's coming, and I don't know what it is. What is it that's coming? An idea, a plan, or philosophy? I don't have any idea.
a couple things. I think we hit on some of them in the work that we're doing next year. So what in the under Tracy's initial section, it talked. I think high school reimagining was one of the areas of focus for this year ahead, and it's a lot about planning. So it's about having consistent three consistent learner goals across every high school in the district. That's something we've been working on with our high school principals, and then a few key things. I'm trying to find that slide, but
We talked about like resume of a graduate. And right now, based on the work that we've done with focus groups, steering committee for this work, as well as the principal retreat that we have kind of a framework that's drafted around what is high school reimagining means. So we can share that framework with you, which then would drive sort of what goes into learner goals and or the resume. It's less about, I would say, an initiative, and it's more about our high schools coming together to talk about what is their practice, what are things they're already doing that align to career exploration, and what we think are these different competencies that kiddos need to go into the workforce of today. And then how do we systematize that and get barriers out of the way around an extraordinary high school experience? Like Dr. Kim told you guys the story about teachers saying, well, we want to combine, this electives experience with some ELA standards and make that like a co-credit for both ELA and electives. And they were saying, well, we can't do that because the district won't let us. And Dr. Kim sort of is opening the door for people to really have some thoughtful engagement on what can we do if there weren't barriers blocking us from doing it. So it's at the very initial stages, and that's what Dr. Kim will talk to you about in October.
For what it's worth, that's exactly what we use. It was just a block thing.
Yes.
ELA and base communication combined, it was not good. Where in that are we fitting in this idea of using high school space for something like this? Yeah, for CTE.
I think as we explore
Or
this,
current enrollment.
yeah, I think it's wrapped up in the discussion. There's also these grant opportunities that we're exploring. And so it's all part of the discussions that we're having, the opportunities that we're looking at, both with our vacant buildings and the vacant space within our high school buildings. So it's definitely an active part of the conversation.
And then on the 24th, you're also going to get, in addition to recommendations for consolidation, you're going to get recommendations for municipal focused engagement. So which municipalities might we begin doing work with around this articulation area, for example? And I think that it can also fit those kinds of conversations, right?
So,
Oh, okay, good.
so this is helpful because I was under the impression we were getting like some sort of plan that we needed to start considering this fall. And I actually think the that's maybe a little bit too, so this would be good to clarify. It sounds like it's slowed down a little from any specific.
Well, because I have a similar, I was thinking, I kept thinking, okay, when are we getting high school reimagined? Like a packet of like, this is the roadmap, right? But I think what I'm hearing is some of it is the, cataloging is not the right word, but like inventorying with what's currently happening that is really exciting and awesome in this space. And then where are the barriers to expanding or doing new things or making those things systemic, and then looking at new opportunities like how we utilize space or how we partner with higher ed for concurrent enrollment. And I think part of it is just needing it to be written down in some way that is like a process map, or I don't know what it is, but I keep thinking, oh, it's coming, and I'm like, I don't know what it is. And I don't know, but it may not be that it's like coming, it's more like, how do we uplift some things, remove barriers for other things, and then create new things. I just don't know how. I can't visualize it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good point. We'll talk to Dr. Kim about how we can share some of that with you guys in the upcoming Friday update, and then when we bring to the public on October 1st. I think, like everything else in the district, like it's about bringing systemness first. So like what you guys already did with start and end times is really important because it leads to like the next thing. We're also studying some schools that may have one or be able to have a common bell schedule within the time frame so that they can share some resources. We're talking about transportation and how you get kids to different places to take advantage of the things that might be available throughout the district. So like before we talked about it, one of the things, the feedback that we got from the high school principals was that up until like the way in which we've been approaching this now, they felt they were in competition with one another to get kids, and now they are becoming more cohesive, and that's really important, like setting that. That's what really I think this year is about, and also working with some of our schools that are on the cutting edge of this, which is why Dr. Kim's doing these personalized meetings. We can't, as large of a system as we are, move everything at once. But Mona 612 is moving at a little bit of a faster pace against this. We have a couple schools that will move a little faster because that's where they are in this. We can't move everybody at once, but we can work on some foundational things. And that's what we asked the principals as part of our retreat time, was what are those, to identify those foundational things that are really important to them that will make the biggest difference, and we can do it every single school, while other schools move at different paces towards this. So, but I understand what you all are saying about wanting to see that, and I think that's a really important point.
In relation to CTE, because I think that's what's on your map, you guys can mind a little bit based on the questions. Just some districts have done some. I don't think it's well known that we have CTE coursework in our traditional high schools. It is available to kids, and we also are doing some scanning of that because we think there are some inconsistencies in terms of student access. So some schools might have a whole slew of opportunities in the CTE space on campus, whereas others might have a few, and then those kiddos have to go to Warren Tech, and Warren Tech has wait lists and work with programs for wait lists. So, what some districts have done is they've sort of had an umbrella around CTE courses, and then everybody aligns to that umbrella, and there's a broader marketing and communication strategy for families and students to understand. Here is what we believe about career tech ed, or career explore, or whatever you're going to call it. But here are CTE or Career Explorer experiences at Tech. Here are the ones that are at Chatfield. Here are the ones that are at Conway. Here are the ones that are at RV. So that people know it's not just a Warren Tech thing.
Right.
Right. And then how do we make sure that there's equal opportunities for kids regardless of what campus they're on? Is part of it related to CTUs.
My other question is, I don't feel like I fully understand the role of municipalities in property disposition. Is it a zoning thing? Is it more than that? Or maybe even beyond that, because you were talking about municipalities and articulation areas, and I guess I'm not sure where the interaction is on that, how that works.
So we, like for example, you guys interacted with the city of Edgewater, and we were at Jefferson, and it was sort of a kickoff and an understanding of what is the demographic study telling us.
Right.
I'm not sure what we've heard from the board is a real interest as we move forward with dealing with our declining enrollment, frankly. Having more runway, which we now have, in more collaborative work with the municipalities to talk about what might make sense for, say, the high school in that articulation area. And so on the 24th, we're going to share with you the municipalities that we think we should begin doing that work with. And once the board affirms that, or kind of gives us a thumbs up, I think we'll be working with the city leadership to build process and procedure to sort of engage in those conversations and let them share in the conversation with us around what they want in terms of identity for that articulation area.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I don't think we have a clear process yet because we still haven't recommended to you which areas we want to work with first.
And they're going to want some input into what we're doing together.
Does that only include like government, or I just think of, I'm on a Arvada Chamber council, it's on talent, so it's a workforce, and some of the school district folks are there.
Yeah.
I'm on it, and then the foundation, there's foundations there, and things like that, so, and they're doing so much work to think about career pathways for kids. So like, is that also, or is this strictly government?
Well, we are engaged with, at different levels of the EDC or this particular engagement with our Arvada Chamber and other.
Like career hubs.
Yeah, and there are other things like this across Jeffco. I think what we are specifically working, I think where this stems from is that last year when we did the school closure work, municipalities did not seem to be on the same page with us regarding the demographics and how that impacted our schools. And we don't see that as a purely school district issue, it's a community issue. Demographics of a community affect both the school district and the local government. And so the particular municipal focus that we're talking about for this is around this question of are we all on the same page about the demographics and what that means for us as cities and communities, as communities, cities, and school districts moving forward.
I guess the question is, so you do mean, by municipal, you just kind of mean that's the area, not our government thing?
Sorry, I mean like the city planner's office.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, but that doesn't preclude us from these other engagements, which we have representation on, and could feed into it. But I think when we present to you next week, we will have a very specific focus and idea in mind for why. So the Edgewater engagement is a really good example. Jefferson articulation area is Jeffco's smallest articulation area in geographic size and in enrollment. We need to be working together going into the future. The other ones we'll recommend to you have some kind of emphasis because of demographic shifts or enrollment issues. That could mean that we're growing in that area of the district. We need help looking at that. But it will be based around that with the mayor, the city councils, and the planning office.
I think part of it too, and again, I appreciate you saying like one does not include the other. For the focus on municipal engagement and part I was frankly taken off guard by how different the lens was from a school board perspective versus a city council member perspective around similar data, and also kind of taken off guard by some of the things that were brought up as like, well, let's just do this and then we'll solve the problem. We're very much not from the school district perspective. So yeah, but we're building more apartments, so that's going to take care of that problem. Well, yeah, but we get 8 kids from that 700-unit apartment complex that you're building. So there's just this sort of misalignment, and I'm not saying that there's like right and wrong in that. I'm just saying that, yeah, I was surprised about what a different kind of trajectory. The conversations, it was like having 2 different conversations. And you have like one data point in the middle of it that you can agree with or not, but it's there. And so really it's to make sure, some of these areas particularly, because there are some, you can just say it out loud, that need more love, care, attention, and focus than others that may be in different spots, either with the enrollment or with how students are doing overall. To make sure as we move forward that we may not agree on the outcome or decisions that are made, but how their zoning impacts our schools. The decisions we make around school closures impacts the city, and if we aren't at the same starting point with at least some sort of continuity of communicating, here's what we're seeing, then we're going to be in a world of hurt, I feel like, again and again as we move through this, because I don't know where the next 20 years goes with enrollment or with our schools in general, but I do know that these are becoming ever more intertwined in terms of decision making. So I think that's why the focus is a little bit more specific for this piece.
Can I ask about one other topic? What do we have, or do we have any plans in place for measuring or understanding the impact of the change in start times? Like, are we measuring, the long-term obvious is we expect this should impact our academic outcomes, as we said. That's what the purpose of this was. But also just both operationally and then even satisfaction-wise, how are we tracking right now? It's a pretty big impact to the district, so I'm just curious. Will we get updated on that?
Yeah. And I think it's going to, we're definitely looking at all the operational implications. We have the family survey in the spring. And so we can think about what to add there. And I think it's one component, but we've got a lot of other components around improvement in student outcomes that will help you run it. And the efficiency, gain the efficiencies, I think the number of fewer routes that we have and hopefully the ability, those are efficiencies bias, but that's also impacted by how many bus drivers we can have and with all the pull from other industries and things like that. But yeah, I think ultimately, I think it can provide, I'm not sure when we'll be done with that.
You might want to think about it. And then also,
I don't know where.
Hey, Susan, are you there?
Yeah, I am. I didn't exactly hear how we were measuring it in response to Danielle's question, but I guess my ask would be, we've already seen how many school districts have done a redo of bell times and start times, and they've shown certain outcomes, which is why we started that whole process and thinking through why we wanted to have new start times and more alignment with minutes for students to be consistent across the district. So I would think that we would be trying to benchmark against those studies that encouraged us to go down this road and caused us to think about this, from a perspective of student benefit. So that to me would be something that we could be starting almost right away in a given year. There's lots of studies out there that we can compare ourselves by.
And there's data that we can get right away. Like, we can look pretty quickly at whether or not this is impacting attendance in personnel classes.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But I would say that we shouldn't start from scratch. I would think that the reason why we did what we did was because other school districts showed benefit to that. And we should be benchmarking ourselves against those data points. And maybe we just have to agree which data points we're going to use and why we chose to go down this path. But that to me would be in alignment with what Danielle is asking. It's like, how do we know what we did makes sense and is effective? So that's one thing. The other thing is I just want to respond back to that CTE and what is the graduate to look like? Couple things on that, and I mentioned this to Tracy is Carnegie credits. And Paula, you would know this far better than I, but that is a struggle when we start looking for mentorships and for apprenticeships for real experiences for students is, well, they don't have enough Carnegie credits to graduate or in the right areas. And so I think that's something I think Tracy alluded to is how do we work with other government or organizations to ensure that our kids aren't being penalized for actually trying out the mentorships or the apprenticeships, and how do they align with what the Carnegie credits would be giving them for graduation purposes.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So, do you want to
On the
address
start
those?
times, I mean, I appreciate the feedback.
Well, I was just in response to our agendas. I was like, can we put it on, I imagine it could be in a few months. I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And just one last thing I just want to add on that, there was in the parent interaction or feedback, there was a lot of concern. One of the bigger concerns was the impact of the start times on athletics and building start jobs. And I do think there might be a sentiment that again, it might be just like one or, 4 people, but who on that 9 to 4 start time that's in some of the schools, I think there's a sentiment that they're thinking, some folks think that this is under review for making change. Some people are wondering if this is a temporary thing, we're gonna get back into the 8 and 3 o'clock, start and end time hours. So in particular, I'm interested in the 9 to 4.
The middle school.
And
we told people we would continue to talk about that, because it's not,
So I think
don't think
people
it's a deal from some people's perspective.
Yeah. No, I think we have kids like in that. So, but I think some people are like, oh, the district is reviewing this
Right.
and
We can lobby.
considering
Yeah.
changing it next
Yeah.
year. And I don't know if that's true, and I wouldn't know how to answer.
I think it's, I have like 8:55, and which, whatever, it works fine, we have carpool, but it is just a shift. What is funny though is the Thursday start time is at 10 o'clock in the morning, because it's a late start, then I'm like, oh, now that is it. So it's those kinds of things, and as a parent, like, it's a challenge to make it work, but it is a big shift in being like, my kid's going to school at 10 in the morning. Why bother? I mean, but they're there till 4,
It is
so
weird.
it's just a weird.
Well, and we can, like I said, we did tell people we would continue to monitor this. We will. We just haven't gotten there, and I think we can think about where that might fit best in this agenda. So we'll give some thought to that and add it. And this is going to be one of those issues that we can continue to talk about it until we're blue in the face. And you will always have the people who want earlier athletics telling you it doesn't work because of athletics, and you will always have people who believe and want to align to the adolescent brain research telling you that it's a good thing. And so it's just, I think what we need to do is get to a place of like, what are the implications of what we're doing, and is there any way to improve it?
And measure.
Yeah, I did hear an interest, and I do think, to be able to say, and not in a way that's like, let's reconsider every year whether or not we're going to, because this instability of that, I think, is nauseating and hard on staff and students and families. But I do think, in this very early time, it's like, just let's get it operationalized.
Yeah.
So different metrics perhaps than looking at like a little bit shorter term, but a little bit further out. Is there a change in attendance rates for first period? And are we then a little further out seeing any changes that are, whether it's causal or corollary, but having just at least setting some of those benchmarks, like here are things we can look at as we move forward, not tomorrow, but and figure out what that could.
And to Susan's point, there are studies that have already been done. So
Yeah.
we can look at them and say, what did they measure?
Right.
And is it feasible for us to measure the same thing?
Yeah.
And then compare ourselves.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I had one other thing.
Sure.
report EL 11, which is school safety. And I have a real interest in instituting a school safety committee. And I know we've had a lot of email interest in that too. We've had it in the past. So would the process go that we could bring that up during study session and get a feel for whether we want to do it or not? And I don't know how we've ever instituted new committees or.
Well, the question is that a board committee or a district committee? Because if for a district committee, we are not involved in making that happen.
Yeah,
It's
so,
a board committee that we are.
so my recommendation is that it's a superintendent staff committee, and that we most likely will have something regarding that in the monitoring report for you to react to as part of our alignment to the executive limitation 11. And so that's on my radar, and we're working on it. One of the things we've done here, you'll see in October, you'll see school safety. You'll see 3.1, which is about meeting kids as unique individuals to reach their full potential, and honoring their individual differences, which relates to some of the conversation we had yesterday. And then we have 3.3, physical and mental health resources and partnerships, which actually has to do not only with mental health, but discipline, right? Because there's this convergence of many things in that space, right? Individual student needs are sometimes at odds with the safety of the whole.
Right.
Safety for all is sometimes at odds with, individual needs. It's all the vice versa things. And so we wanted to put those things together just so that we can queue up a robust conversation around some of those tensions for our community to hear the board discuss. And we are doing some great work with our discipline matrix, for example, and response to intervention with behavior. We also want to be able to highlight the school safety stuff that we're doing. So those three are shifted a little bit in your calendar just because we think it's a really good thing to talk about them all together, since they're so interconnected.
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
And I will most likely be recommending putting together a superintendent staff committee.
Does that include community or safety? Or no?
It would.
Oh, it does.
It would be staffed by us, but got a community committee.
I have a question about the October meeting. Susan, do you have something?
Can you? Well, all I'm seeing is the board priority transition green page, and I'm not seeing what you guys might be looking at for like September, October.
Oh, yeah, it's in the packet.
Yeah.
Hold on, I don't think I
Okay.
have it on the
Thank you.
slide. Sure.
Yeah. Well, it was there. Okay.
Okay.
Somebody, it just went out.
Yeah.
So is there, if in September, and maybe I missed this from the conversation yesterday, you do have the Moss Adams, that report, would that be at the same time then that we would know what funding is available for Fletcher Miller and for Wheat Ridge and potentially the lights that we were talking about?
That's in October for the second, the reconciliation presentation, and then the board.
Okay.
Then the board will have a discussion November 1st regarding.
Okay, so
What?
will we as a board then be able to make the decision on those priorities before Stephanie and I walk off?
Yes, that's November 1st. You all will discuss the funding prioritization.
Okay.
Of your interests.
Yeah. And we had a robust
so-
conversation about this yesterday, Susan.
Okay, great. Okay,
and
then I
so-
won't waste your time.
The materials that Hilltop and Brenna shared with the board yesterday kind of outline our best thinking to date on various options around Fletcher Miller.
Okay.
Which by default then also leads to how do we prioritize funds for Wheat Ridge, for example?
Or any of the other
priorities that the board might have. So
Okay.
I think we have some good next steps in that space, and I actually think yesterday, maybe you guys we can norm on this real quick from the board. I think we made a decision that Stephanie and the rest of the folks here felt urgency around moving this forward and wanting to really just allocate funds as definitely
Right.
before you and Stephanie are off the board to make this,
Okay.
especially Fletcher Miller and probably the Wheat Ridge piece, a priority.
Okay, all right, then I won't bother the discussion, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to follow up with you in our next update meeting and just kind of fill you in on that conversation a little more.
Okay, and is it a Hilltop document in a booklet that you guys were talking about?
No, so
Somebody has a,
it's, if you look at the in board docs from yesterday's meeting, it's posted along with the slide deck. Inside the slide
Okay.
deck, there's a link to it. It should take you to a document.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
So as we, oh, sorry, I may have been done on that conversation yet. Sorry, that was like the most awkward one. No, moving on. Go ahead.
Right, I know we're
Sorry.
trying to be quick.
I just sit down and
In the
disrupt.
property disposition update, is that, when are we,
What are we gonna sell something?
happening? Is that gonna be a point where, what I'm mostly curious about is like, are we getting
Additional.
any bids,
Oh, and
interest?
so the bid packet actually hasn't gone out yet. So I'm probably going to give you guys a look at the materials that JLL has created for the marketing and the bid proposals. They're going to come in September to share with you the process and how things are coming in and how they're marketing and all of that. So no, we aren't rolling in terms of accepting proposals yet, but we will be. I think the first or second week in September.
Where is that on the agenda? I know it's on here somewhere.
In September, I think it might be during the
Oh, there
regular
it is.
meeting on
Got it.
September 14th. Put it
Yep.
there because there'd be a lot of public interest in it. We want to make sure that the public had a view into it. Ultimately, they've been fielding, their information is available online. They've been fielding lots of questions and one-on-one conversations with people who are potentially interested in the properties.
So I'll send this as an email I already did to Jennifer, like I can't say from here.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can figure out how to plan before that.
Yeah.
To get feedback, so, yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to do a double check, so there's two questions I have, two questions for you. One is, what's missing, if anything, from this, because this really lays out our agendas, not that they can't be again, this is the draft, through the transition, till the transition. So are there other sort of key priorities, things that you want to make sure return to us as a board in this current board iteration that are not currently on here? And the second question is a thumbs up, or at least the middle or down, I don't know, sub-thumb movement, indicating if you're comfortable moving forward with this and not doing agenda setting like monthly, but really looking at this as the roadmap for our work together over the next few months. Say, okay, I got one thumb. Yeah, that's three thumb. Susan, I can't see your thumbs, but just let me know.
Well, I can't really show you my thumbs, I'm on a phone.
Yes.
So my one question, and once again, I apologize if you guys talked about this yesterday, or if I can't just see it on my phone, and that is academic review of our CMAS scores and alignment with our BAP, and where we're going forward. So I don't know where that is, but that I'm hoping that's somewhere in that 3 month.
Yes, so on September 6th, we have monitoring report 1.1, which is
Okay.
the gonna be, but what we looked at sort of were previewed in our key initiatives with Dr. Kim.
Okay. Okay.
That full presentation will be on September 6th.
Okay, all right. And then at that presentation, will we have, Tracy, some move forward, shift, pivot, diagnosis, what next kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I'm happy for all board members. This is a big one, right? The 1.1 is monitoring how we're doing with student outcomes. So if you have specific interests in something you'd like to see as part of that report, like what Susan just mentioned, what do we need to change? Where are we making adjustments? If there's anything you feel specifically that you'd like to see in that report, please let me know. can shoot me a text, send me an email, or we can just talk about it in your next update meeting. And
Okay.
any of these monitoring reports that are coming up, if there are specific things, like Mary said, I think we should talk about a committee that you have interest in seeing, that would be good for me to know.
Well, I mentioned this in the last monitor report. I hope they have the data in it rather than just links. This is just like what is actually in the report. I remember the last one we had was linked to a bunch of data, but then the actual report didn't have it in here. And I thought that was very difficult to navigate.
Okay,
So that would be helpful if the data we're talking about in the report are right there. Even if it makes it 10 feet longer, I'd rather have those charts and graphs or whatever they are.
And I think that there was a lot of,
Lisa, did you hear that?
first time around,
Yeah.
what does the board want to see different? So hopefully that's
Because
helpful.
you all kept saying they're like data reports, and I expected to open it and be like, the data, and I was like, wait, I have to go find the data.
The data.
But the narrative there is very technical. Well,
Yeah.
kind of there.
Okay, that's great.
Yep. Okay, so anything else that I want to just make sure that we've looked at this and seen, and like Tracy said, if there's something where all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, I can't believe we're not going to hear about or be talking about X, then just let's connect and then figure out where it can live. And if that's a board, something the board supports, we'll just move forward with it and figure out a place for it to live. Anything else? Susan, anything else you want to make sure is included before December?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I have I think we have that, everything listed. I can always clarify, once I look at what you guys had discussed yesterday.
Yeah,
So, if I have anything, I will definitely, don't you worry, I'll find you all.
Yeah, you know how to find us. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
We talked
Okay.
a lot in this retreat about support for our center programs. And I'm already forgetting, like Tracy, you said a couple times, we're doing work on that, a study, of like incentives and all of that.
For staffing?
For staffing, yeah. Is that something that like is happening so presently that we can get updates on it? It feels like an urgent kind of topic area because the supports for our center programs is obviously so critical. So is that something, or do we need more time to have an update on that? Is that something we could bring back up?
I think we gave you some staffing data. We didn't yet. Okay, we can give you an update, but I think let's start with an update on that in your weekly update.
Okay.
And I would probably also include other areas that are difficult to staff, like transportation, and give you some of that information. I think I also mentioned we've gone from being like 60 drivers short to 19. And I don't know, that is ebbing and flowing, obviously, too, as people make decisions, individuals. So we can give you some staffing information, and then from there, I think Matt can also add some context about what we're doing to try to support those areas that are struggling.
And then the Rob's one school update, is that on the agenda? What we talked about this morning with the numbers of how things have turned out.
For enrollment updates?
Sorry.
Yes, because that'll be in October.
Okay. I was just trying to think of things we
Yeah,
talked about there.
absolutely. Let me just, see, make sure it's on here. Agenda, consent, class, vote.
It's either, I'll check with Brenna, it's either in November, I can't remember when you guys received, but it's like our official October count, review that we present to every year, so I'll just, I'll confirm, I can't remember if it's, and she may have called with something else in here, so.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Oh, it's right there, November 9th, 23-24 budget and enrollment update.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
We can certainly provide you some unofficial information. I would say probably, we see things, so that technically the October, so Enroll Jeffco closes for open enrollment August 30th. You can use Enroll Jeffco, not a lot of people do, but through August 30th. Once that's done, the only way students can transfer is through admin transfer, which happens not very often. So therefore, after like the second week of September, we should be able to send you some more valid data about like where we are with enrollment, especially at our receiving schools. So we can certainly do that unofficially. And then she'll have the actual October count submitted to the state.
That'd be great, yeah. Okay, other things pop up. No, you're one. keep it coming, because I really want it to be reflective of what the work we want to do, so I think it's great. Anything else that, okay, we'll reach out if you wake up in the middle of the night and fever, and don't call me that, but in the morning, call me when we're all awake.
Yeah.
And let me know. Okay, so that's that part of it. So we're gonna transition a little bit to thinking about, after we get all of this amazing work done this fall, having 2 new board members that will join this illustrious group, and what we want to think about in terms of onboarding. So as Jennifer is working on, and we're thinking about how new board members get kind of up and running as quickly and as successfully as possible, a little bit of reflecting back around what are some of those key categories that it's not, may not just automatically show up in a handbook, but that would have been the most sort of critical parts for you as a new board member to be able to feel confident and comfortable with what you're doing, because it's just a lot. It's a lot all at once. So to think about what you wish you had known earlier, maybe than you figured it out. Is there any specific content or materials that you kind of figured out later on and were like, oh my gosh, this just unlocked the key to my success? And then people, connections, resource, like some of the relationships that were really instrumental in helping with your own onboarding. So in any of those categories, so that we can pull from our own experiences and add it to what's being created, so that we can make sure that we have a really good, positive transition with new board members. Yeah.
I wish I'd known more about the different schools that we have. I knew the neighborhood schools in my area and whatever, but I didn't know option schools or charter schools. Kind of knew about it, but alternative schools, I didn't really know the difference between an alternative and an option. Those kinds of overview of what's available in the district.
We may already have this on the agenda, because I understand, Matt, that you're going to be helping us with our retreat with our new school board members at the CASB.
I know the request was made, I think we're waiting for you all to decide.
Okay.
I'm available.
I do think the sooner our new folks get familiarized with policy governance and how that works,
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
the sooner our new folks get a basic understanding of policy
Oh,
governance
TG.
and how it works, is going to be really important. I assume that our monitoring report schedule will be in there. Because I know at first I just felt very lost as to, I felt like we weren't even getting any input. At first it was like, so we just listened to reports. I was like, now that I really, and because we've got it worked out so that the study session is now linked to the actual meeting, it makes so much more sense.
Pretty good move. Yeah, it's a good success moment.
It was like,
I forgot about that already.
What the heck is even going on here?
Right, I felt that way.
So, yeah.
We're a year now.
But I think, just for them to understand. So, at this meeting, you'll get all this information so that you can act on it at this meeting.
Yeah.
And, sort of giving them the basics of how the structure works.
Yep.
Because I think it's also very easy when we're talking about scheduling to go, well, I need it here and here. And you start to get into that same position we were in before, where we had the meeting, the business meeting, and then the study session was the next week. And so,
Yeah.
I think it's helpful, like, I remember one of the first things Tracy said to us was, oh, we'll see you at CASB, and I was like, I don't know anything about that. This was like November. I don't know.
Really?
We had no idea. We don't even know that exists.
all of a sudden,
Right.
we're like, I'm blocking out 4 days in 2 weeks.
I thought that, I had asked that all candidates get,
You mentioned that then, and we hadn't.
And you're like, we did not know.
None of us knew.
None of us knew.
But also, what I wanted to say is that board, I mentioned this to Tracy, and I know Tracy, you said that most do it anyways, but like attaching the board meeting to CASB is something I don't really understand. I wish, and especially for this very first one, and because it's always a little more rushed. I personally cannot stay for 4 days. I mean, right now I think our reservation is like 5 nights. I can stay like 2 or 3. So just time-wise, these folks are, we also don't know their schedules, and then so if they're not elected, and then 2 weeks later we're saying you're supposed to take Wednesday through Sunday and be somewhere. So all I'm saying is like, I think, and that's just like the first thing. So I think really orienting them to the scheduling, but then also honoring that they probably need to make adjustments in their personal lives for that. So I really wish that that board meeting was not done in CASB, because for one, it definitely, not that lots of people come to it, but it definitely makes it almost prohibitive. And then I think it's very hard for me personally to be at CASB, and then I just feel like we don't do this. We don't have a board meeting like this. We have a retreat. Sorry, the board retreat. I'm sorry. And so for the new board members, I think it would be helpful to separate those things so we can do this work while they're not overwhelmed with CASB. That's just my personal opinion. I wish, for me, I was like, what is happening? Oh, is this? And I was like, this is a retreat. I don't
know I'm feeling relaxed.
Or like, what are we doing? Because it was that one day in that little board room, and it was very good, but I didn't really get it. I didn't really get what we were doing.
Yeah.
That day. And it didn't, and it felt, I thought we were doing something related to the conference. I didn't get that we do retreats. No one ever said we do board retreats, and they happen quarterly.
Twice a year.
They happen twice a year. But that kind of information, I think, or sometimes Tracy would refer to onboarding, and I'd be like, are we going to an onboarding process? I think we should officially be like, we are here to help support you in onboarding. And these are components of that. It seems obvious, but it's really not when you come on.
Yeah.
You're just like,
The assumption of what's obvious and not.
yeah.
Which is why it's helpful, like, I think, to use it to inform what we're doing next, because otherwise just the same practices keep getting repeated that may not be as helpful. Yeah. So, okay.
And I don't know, that's just like thinking from our first month, I remember being like, what?
Wasn't that insane when we found out about casting? And I'm like, what?
And Tracy was like, well, a retreat, and there's this huge state conference, and we're all like, be there in a couple weeks.
How do others feel about the retreat connected to CASB versus having it be something that's separate and street?
Well, I think there's 2 considerations there. I think one is the consideration of people's schedules, which is probably the most critical. I'm a big fan of retreats not happening with business happenings. Being a
Present
retreat.
companies. Present looking. No, but it's.
So CASB, the Broadmoor, I felt like was a nice setting for that. It gets you away from everything else. But if your personal life is such that your head cannot be in that game because you've got so many other pieces that are falling apart because of it.
Well, I probably skip the conference so that I can attend the retreat, because I can't do both time-wise.
And
So then I'm like, why am I here doing a retreat? Because I just drove all this way to do a retreat when the point is to be at the conference.
Yeah.
I can't do both time-wise. I can't spend nothing with kids.
Well, and I think that
There
there.
are kids that take to school.
One of the things that may be helpful to do, and I know it wasn't done for me, and I can't speak for you all, but there are so many components, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know whether or not there's like this is all for a new board member track.
There was.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is if we, as new people come on, it's more explicitly, mapped out, like your professional development onboarding in this moment is this new board member track that's happening, and then maybe, outlining networking opportunities or in a more guided way, because otherwise you're just standing there with people you don't know. I'm like, networking's weird. And then have the specific Jeffco Board retreat follow that by, you start butting up into the holidays, which is hard, but even a week later for, I don't know.
Well, what's the difference of driving here and doing it that day? The same day as planned. That's all I'm saying is like,
I don't understand what you're saying.
Coming here for the retreat on the same day that we have it scheduled, but so that you're just driving up here for that period, and then you get to drive back home and take care of your family.
Yeah,
As
that's what I
opposed
said.
to being up in Color Springs.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
oh, I thought you were suggesting doing it like you said we're butting up to the holidays, like as though we would do the retreat 2 weeks after Thanksgiving.
Oh, well, no, I just meant having it be different, less separate time.
She's not talking about Sundays.
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't.
She's saying, so like we have it scheduled on Wednesday at the Broadmoor.
Oh.
We have Thursday, Friday, Saturday at the conference.
Yeah, I just don't want
This
people
would
to
be
not go to Casby.
Wednesday here.
So you still have to take off work, it's just not driving.
Yeah. So for my professional life, if I go on a business trip, I go for 2 nights, and like twice in my life I've ever been on 3, because I drive kids back and forth because I have a job at home. So I don't go on long business trips, and I can't.
Piece of it, I think, at what altitude is most helpful for onboarding, and what's the information that would be most helpful to understand. So I appreciate what you said, Mary, because I don't feel like, at least when I was onboarded, we didn't talk about policy at all the entire time I was on. Or like, I didn't even know we were connected to policy until a good 18 months after I was on this board.
I knew because Paula told me about it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you
Paula
don't,
taught me.
we didn't really,
When
no
we
one
did that,
operated
yeah.
for me, and we didn't connect, I didn't know what people were talking about, you know, like, whatever, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
We had Kristen Edgar do kind of a legal training for you guys related to important legal aspects of being a board member, and I think she touched on policy governance. I don't think it was a big training. And then the second thing we did was we thought, well, the biggest thing you do is approve the budget, and the most important thing you do. And so that's why we brought Brenna in and then we had David Bell there, just because so much of our budget is staffing, and we thought you guys might have those questions that you can answer. So it's really helpful feedback to say, can we just step back from all of that, maybe focus on, you need to know the board policies, right? And then you can take from there, like that next layer around the policies related to budget, this is what that means, and there's a primer on budget and stuff like that. So that's really helpful to think about.
Yeah. What are some of the other, because I'm just taking a second follow-up with Jennifer as well. In terms of content, or maybe order of content, all of it's important, but sometimes the ordering makes a big difference, because then other people, as your eyes roll in the back of your head, you're not listening to the rest of it, because it's too much.
Yeah, I think the content would be the Tracy's executive, cabinet members, and the people that go below that, and then the community students and how they know the articulation areas, and then we as board members can see too, where we fit in with the articulation areas. And I also feel like the programs, center programs, especially special ed, which is everywhere. There's special ed teachers everywhere. I'm still learning the pathway of ownership for special ed. So they have their own assistant directors, I think they're called, for special ed. And not that we have to get into detail, and it's just something that I have a really interest in. But just the pathways. Here's the student in school, and here's where the school, staffing usually looks like, and here's the support structures going up from that school, special ed here and community schools there. But that kind of a diagram of the district.
Yeah, so the intersection of what
Yeah.
centrally how it.
Yeah, when I heard student success, I didn't know what the heck that meant.
Yeah.
And then there's the director or chief of schools, and what's the difference as to there is.
What would be helpful, it took me a long time because I wasn't an educator and didn't know, I was so surprised when I found out we didn't have curriculum for literacy. And it made me go why do I not know? I think helping board members understand what our history or standards or current status, whatever it is of curriculum, and how we fund it, or how we expect schools to use one thing or not, and just what is the systemness of our curriculum around especially literacy and math. I just think an overview of that for folks who aren't coming as an educator through a process to get there does this new stuff.
So some of this we'd be talking about maybe being in binder to digest at your own rate.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, if we put all of this into the retreat,
No.
we'll talk about a
No.
fire hose.
Oh, no,
we're not talking about
Okay.
materials.
No, this is really all of the
What-
ways in
what
which
would
we're
you
gonna
want to know?
support
Gotcha,
onboarding.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
it
That
could be
makes
that
perfect sense.
it just needs to
I was
be.
just like,
No,
oh,
you're fine.
here.
At your fingertips.
Yeah,
It needs to be handy.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
The quick and dirty guide to how the district.
Yeah, like when you're like, I don't understand, you're like, who in the hell is that person?
Yeah.
And then you can look at something.
And then the committee, which we're still trying to figure out, but like
Sure.
all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a committee on that.
I think it was like vote. I feel like also I'm voting on committees. What are these committees? These people, why am I voting?
Yeah, oh, definitely, I think acronyms would be super helpful.
Yeah. And we're also in the process of working, I'm working with another board member who's cycling off at the end of this year with CASB to create a new board member onboarding sort of series. So resources that are in different categories that board members kind of self-pace through. And so Stacey and I are working on that right now, and we're going to have it done. Well, I should probably start working faster on it, but by that time. So there'll be other sort of external sort of opportunities where we can have these categories and then say, this is Jeffco, and then here's some, like more broadly speaking, being a board member includes, and then have some of those that folks can do on their own time as well, outside of a board pack that we give them or training that Jeffco will provide to them.
Yeah, I think those do-it-yourself or at your own pace learning would be helpful. And also for the board packet or something, I think it would be nice to be able to give every new board member or to all our schools and some kind of a page either from an FCE dashboard or the insights or something that here's your school, and then with principal contact or something. Yeah, I know.
We need to make it ourselves.
Yeah, do ourselves, but.
Yeah.
Also, I wish someone had explained to me how the board meetings work. Like, I did not understand necessarily the consent agenda and what was going to be on there and why things got put on there and what my obligation or responsibility was
To be
for
prepared
those.
for each of those.
Yeah, I learned a lot of that through Susan, really digging into the consent agenda, which was helpful to see that there was, I didn't understand it entirely. And I feel like that I wish I had the first few months because I felt confused when I.
Yeah, I put that under, because somebody had said that, as a different suggestion for the function of the different types of meetings that we have, but then
Yeah.
add on there, because I do think that expectation management, when we're going back to like, no one wants to be surprised. You definitely don't want to be surprised in the middle of a public meeting when someone's like, now we're going to a vote. I know this has happened before. And you're like, I don't know what we're voting on.
And you don't know what you can say or do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's uncomfortable. So I put that under there, because I do think, yeah, it's like a different level of anxiety when you're like, please don't call me, because I don't know what you're Please. And what we can do is go through and I'll connect with Jennifer about this, like what are those things on this list, and then she's got many other ones, but that are printed resources. What are the ones that really we want to be able to have conversation about? Because it's not so much about, like, you can read the policy, but then as we've had all of these discussions, really the gray area is the part that gets to be tricky for board members and really does need to have more of the retreat kind of stuff. And then what could be that bigger layer outsourced, like self-paced, that could be provided through CASB, through organizations. There was, what state is it? I don't know if you remember, Matt, but that has it's like a certification, a statewide certification for new board members for an onboarding. That's a self-paced kind of module. There's this one, it's Connecticut.
Connecticut just adopted a rule that every newly elected board member in the first year of their term has to do, I think it's 10 hours.
Yeah.
I think that's
would be a great role for the state to play.
Who does the training?
I believe in Connecticut, they're a little bit different. They have a state board or regents or something like that.
Yeah, I think, so it'll be, in some ways modeled, like, if we have, like, through CASI, it's obviously not required by the state, but, the opportunity for people to do that, it's just another layer. Okay, so we'll sort of put it into those buckets as we're dividing in. What other things would be useful? Yeah.
Yeah, so also, the different logons, so I know we get our Outlook account, that's pretty basic and stuff, but then I found out I had an employee ID and I got a Gmail address that's associated with it, and I have to be on the Gmail in order to get Google access to, a document. And then my password needed to be changed, so I didn't even know what the password was because it was last year or whatever. So, anyway, that, and then the badge, do we need it, don't need it, when is it used, how, whatever, what will it do for you?
What discounts are we giving us back?
You get to go with the right site.
I don't, which I never go.
I actually don't think you can.
You don't, because the style is so historical.
Jimmy. Jimmy. Yeah, Jennifer.
So the question I have is actually for Matt. So we were hoping to have you kind of help us really orient our new board members of the retreat that you're kind of discussing. And that would be that date, the Wednesday of the CASB meeting. So if we chose, instead of having Heather at, but instead maybe here in the district, are you even available to do something? So that's kind of the caveat of why we were thinking we were going to have that retreat at the CASB so that we can have Matt join us.
Okay, well, let's talk through what options we have for that, and if it maybe needs to be broken into, which I don't object to it in any way, shape, or form, but sometimes I think, rather than like one long monster retreat, it's like sort of broken into different smaller sections that make sense. It is still scheduling people, but let's think about options.
The swearing in is scheduled the night before CASB begins. And so it's contemplated that we would drive up that evening.
I can't be before 10 a.m. on Wednesday.
Yeah, you get that meeting and then, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just was putting that on your radar. And so if you want to do something different, we wouldn't have Matt with us in the month of December.
Yeah. Okay.
And I do think we can tell board candidates about, if you are elected, here's the swearing in date and time,
Yeah, we should
here's
do that
the
now.
new member CASB sessions and the dates. We have held rooms for you. I mean, we could do a much better job of, I thought we were doing all that, I apologize. We'll do better.
You were also very new
I
at that point.
Yeah, I was. It was my first
We didn't have all
CASB.
the
So
stuff.
another question, if it turned out that really the best way to do this is Wednesday, because of having Matt there and, up in Broadmoor, and you get there when you can get there. So, especially now that you've been on the board for a while, there are worse things than not being there for the whole custody process.
Oh,
It
yeah.
seems to me.
I just can't, yeah.
Agreed.
And, yeah, I could just leave early. It's just a little late, yeah. But couldn't we also, if you're helping a lot with policy governance part of, or, like, can we do like a policy governance orientation for a board on Wednesday? Can we do the retreat in January when, like, we've got our grounding, and like we've got through the holidays and do a real working retreat?
I mean, you all can do whatever you want. I think that part of it was just to have, because at that, you would have old and new, except you.
Oh, you would still in December?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was
because I'm still on
I
the
didn't
CASB
realize.
board.
You
So,
will represent the
yeah, and we're presenting, yeah. So I'll be there too. So part of it was just to have a transition happen, like, within a bunch of ways.
I
But
didn't realize that.
But that does not have to be a guiding force. I mean, I know how important I am. But I'm not that important. So, you all can, that is your board to work with, not mine.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I wonder if it makes sense for us to identify somebody who's to work with you, me, Lisa, Jennifer, to think through some of this conversation and come back with a suggestion about what happens that Wednesday, what might happen at a later date, and take this feedback. I think it's been very helpful about what worked for you, what didn't work for you, was a challenge, and really try to put together an onboarding and new board orientation, because you've got to orient together, right?
Yeah, I think that's great. Is there one of you that wants to do that? Yeah, I think I was like, no, thank you.
You know I am So Lisa, can you be our point person and pull together Mary and Stephanie?
Yeah.
And I'm okay if you guys want me to join you for that, or if you want to do some planning without me with just Lisa and Jennifer. I'm totally comfortable with that too, just given my calendar.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fine. If that's comfortable for you all to think about doing it like that, and then we can brainstorm what options maybe. So maybe it's like smaller bite-sized chunks and we just sort of triage what's the most critical information and what order does it flow in, and then bring in some of these extra or external resources as well to map out what that looks like over a 1-year period of time, starting with what happens at CASB and making sure it's on people's knowledge.
Just want to say for all that, I really do love the idea of the orientation and then because what I like about our retreats like this is we have had 2 days of a lot of hours, and I feel like we get a lot of work done.
Yeah.
And I like this time of year. And I think that in the CASB ones, I've always felt like it's a little rushed, or like it's just quick.
We don't know each other at all.
Yeah, well, even last
Even
year
when
was
you
very
do,
quick.
it's just you tired, man. By the end of that time, by that Saturday, it is tiring. I mean, it's.
But we like new board members to get some time to really work together like this. It's good to me, like, rather than kind of waiting till August.
Sure.
Can I ask one more question, just because that has implications for the cabinet team? I think at Paula's request, and then several other board members kind of said, yeah, that would be great. We set up like some meetings with a board member and 1 or 2 cabinet members this year, just so you guys could talk to them about what you do, how's it going. Were those, and then Mary, you had mentioned this, how is the district organized? Who does what? Where's special ed? Where's ELL? And all that. Was that a helpful structure? Do you want to continue it? Because if so, I think we need to get some of those meetings set up for you guys and future board members once they get on board. And it could be something that we offer new board members pretty quickly, just so that they get to know the cabinet team.
Well, I remember when we first came on, before we ever did a visit at school, we met with Kevin.
Okay.
And I found that incredibly helpful.
Okay, that's helpful. That's good to know.
That was good. Super helpful. And doing it again this year, I also found helpful. For one thing, there were so many changes between those first meetings and the second. Changes in people, changes in structure, changes. And I wanted to know what people thought about it. Part of what we do as a board, yes, we oversee the whole district, but that includes district functions. So I think there's something to be said.
I did like they were more prepared last year. I didn't prepare as much as just one at a time. Because then it felt like someone was getting more time than the other. We would do 2 cabinet members at
Yeah, I think we did that because we couldn't find time on you guys' calendars.
I mean, 2 board members or 2 cabinet members?
2 cabinet members. So we're going to, so I always felt like one cabinet member got to speak most of the time.
And
And then we
then
hurried
very-
the last 10 minutes for whoever else was in the room with us.
Yeah.
2 board members was helpful. to do
Okay,
it.
yeah, that's.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I like talking to Pat, or, when like Matt and Jen together was hard. I don't think that was a combo. Anyway, it was.
Yeah, maybe we think about how to strategically pair them so that it's more of a, it's just good to know because we'll go ahead and schedule those this year. And I do think having our new board member, probably with me, and a little bit of a small candidates, just talk about board as well as the org chart, will be good too.
Yeah, I think so too, because it's a big organization. It's hard to know where things live.
structured. You know, and like that some have APs and some don't. That, you know, there's, like, it's just new stuff for some of us.
Yeah.
Like that there's these learning specialists. And so just even, so the org structure of the
Coaches,
schools.
and then there was like a creative coach, like what's the difference between a coach and a coach?
Or a dean and an AP
Yeah,
at the
right.
high school.
Yeah.
So it's at the, so district and local school is structured to get learning.
Yeah, and then this is like options about SBD and how people are on this stuff. Okay. So many good things to learn. Okay, on this question, or these questions, what else rises up in terms of things to make sure that we're thinking about as we plan out, not just retreat, their initial meeting, we want to call it the initial thing, but how it goes through, how we're providing as much support as possible through onboarding. Which to me, onboarding is like a year-long process because it's just a lot. It's a lot to learn.
On my job at HP, I was the new hire manager. And that's all I did for 6 months to a year. Everybody from different departments who just came on board. And I just oriented them to the company and got them all work with and all get
All the good stuff. Yep. Okay. Well, as we sort of bring this back to you all, I'm sure you'll look at other things. You're like, oh yeah, no, there's that part. So we'll make it iterative. So people need to see whoever's on the board. Okay, we have the 1 more hour and ish, a little bit less. And some of the things I feel like it took us a little bit of a minute after Tracy was hired and then after transition of majority of the board to find the process of the tool and all of the pieces that we wanted so we can really move forward in a way that both is focused on students and focused on how we can best support the leader of our district. So I'm not going to read everything, but really this will be the, is this our first full year of using that tool? And
Yeah, because last year there was an evaluation, but we were still moving on.
yeah, it was a half and half, it was a split one. So I think it'll be a really helpful, both practice and cycle to begin. So is there anything else you want to say about just process-wise?
No, I feel good about going into it. I'm excited to hear what we're doing.
Yeah, okay. Any questions about just the process for it? Because then I'll go to the next slide, but
I just have a question. Where do we find these slides?
We will so yesterday we uploaded them to Board Docs, the ones that we did yesterday. Today I'll upload the ones we use today.
yeah. And sorry, did you have a second question? I just cut you off. One of the things that we will continue as a practice, so you all let me know if this works for you, if you want to try something different. What we did last year that I felt like worked well is I had a message to all of you and then had any follow-up conversations needed, but around, what are the, sort of looking at that bottom bullet point, strengths and weaknesses relative to achievement of the ends, specific things that you would want to bring up in the write-up portion of the superintendent evaluation. So we go through the meeting and take all of the information, notes, feedback from all of us and put it into one document that is something that then is Tracy's formal evaluation. And the way that the process we used last year was that, there are sometimes individual board members with like one thing that is like their, I can't say it, my brain is turned off so I can only say it in a nasty way and I'm not going to. Their primary concern. Let's say something terrible. And
You were going to say hobby.
I was like hobby with an O, yeah, okay. So wanting to make sure that it is really the voice of the board that's going into Tracy's evaluation, not the voice of individual board members. So we took, okay, where is there synergy? Where do we have the majority of the board that is really feeling strong about certain areas of strength and weakness, or not weakness, but opportunity relative to the superintendent. So we were gonna use that same process, so that it really is board voice going into Tracy's evaluation.
And
That was such a long way of saying that, go ahead.
And I know, I think what we did last year was fine, especially since I didn't have anything to go on prior to that. The summative, what did you put to it? But now that we do have goals, are we gonna have a matrix? And if you said that, so sorry.
No, I didn't.
But, okay,
Yes.
yeah, that really said that you did talk about strengths and challenges or opportunities, but just to say,
Yes.
me, yeah.
Yes, and so what Tracy presented, whenever that was here, I have it,
We have this.
is the in progress or not met or whatever
Yes.
those things are. So that will be part of it, will be, yeah, she can show you more.
I can just show you really quick, just to remind you. So we had goal number 1 of literacy. And this was this spring, we did a mid-year check-in, and I told you that I was thinking we were on track for the literacy goal based on the mid-year data from maths. And then in the math, we said we were off track because we were either stagnant or because we were declining in our mid-year data. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at data, summative data for the year now, and I'll refresh, it'll look something like this.
And that's good, I appreciate that, but what about our evaluation of your evaluation? You know, so you have said this is in
Oh,
progress.
you're saying a summary sheet that would go in there.
She's like, do we have a rubric that we are using as your evaluation?
We have, what did we, now I can't even remember. Last year was split. No, I don't think so.
No.
We had our own rubric for ourselves, and then we were just using the, to identify those key areas, we were using that process of what do you identify as key strengths, the key challenges moving forward, and using those in discussion, like we want the superintendent, like here's how she's done on these targets that we've set out as her goals, and then here is the narrative around, here are the material strengths that we think that the superintendent brings, here are the challenges that we want the superintendent to address. But it's not in a matrix form.
I know, but I would like to have it up for each goal, and so that I could say, you know, wow, 10 out of 10, knocked it out of the park here, and even if you haven't met the goal,
Yeah.
I could still put in something that I'm okay, I'm good with, you're on track, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, some kind of a,
I think it could be helpful if so we have like 11 goals. And in this spring one, you know, it's, there's like all of the student outcome ones, right? There's some things around financial sustainability, ROFs, start times. So, I mean, those are more tactical goals that we had, not necessarily just student outcomes, but supported them hopefully. So we could put together like our progress towards those goals so that the board members can see that as they're thinking about their comments.
Right, and then we could have a matrix, like,
Yeah.
like the one we use at the university, you know, and there must be a Jeffco one for.
Yeah, where it's like,
use.
right, we
Yeah.
all have different, or I'm wondering if it's the matrix that's like, so I'm thinking about utility here for what's the benefit? Is it the matrix that you're looking for, or is it really more the opportunity to have some like board commentary on each of these sort of outlined goals or sections?
the commentary is good, I like that, but I guess I would just like to be able to say, on this goal, the progress and whatever, I'm thinking it far exceeds. You know, it's the kind of surveys that we put out for our community, far exceeds or on track.
Expectations.
Yeah, meeting expectations or got a long way to go. So that kind of thing, that then we could just sort of see,
Sure.
agree.
Yeah, Matt, did you have something you wanted to?
Well, I was just gonna say from, again, the policy governance framework, as you get through a full year of monitoring, your monitoring reports become exactly what you said, because now you have received a report that is specific, again, it's in the board, either accepted that report or gave additional guidance for that. So that really makes up the bulk of it. And it makes it very simple, because if you get 12 monitoring reports, the board says, yep, we met the goal on 10 of them, we're on progress for one, and maybe one's not, you can just quickly do that in your head. And then you have some kind of a framework for individual board comments. But again, if you're strictly going to hold her accountable to what you're monitoring, the reports are the
You're suggesting that it's binary. It happened or not, there's no valence.
No, it's up to the
So-
board to have that
Yeah.
reasonable interpretation. So she presents a monitoring report that says third grade reading was off the chart. And the board says, well, student literacy means all grades, right? And so yes, we think you're advancing, you know, and there's gradients.
Well, what
that-
Marion's just asking for is something that says, can we just say on a valence, where that's, it's not a yes or no if it happens.
Yeah, I
But
think,
the board has that conversation and either accepts that report as evidence that it's happening.
You're saying it is binary.
Yeah, no, the board can say
I
whatever.
think, yeah, I mean, I think what he's saying is that it's up to us to determine, like, is this a satisfactory monitoring report for what we're monitoring, for what we're evaluating her on? So there's a couple different directions here. So we have a lot of evidence that's being pulled together, not just Tracy saying on track or not,
Right.
but the evidence that kind of comes through those monitoring reports and some other, obviously there's more there. So I think what Matt's saying is that we are accepting those as sort of ongoing evidence of performance that leads up to this. I'm trying to figure out, like, my kind of personal challenge here is that I don't know what it adds to the overall evaluation to have a rubric in addition to something that says, like, we're on track, we're not on track, we're.
Well, if you wanted to go, and in future we will, talk about a raise. And if we have, documentation that said she was exceptional in all these areas. And so this is why I would go for this kind of a raise versus a pass-fail kind of
But
a.
the narrative goes through that to say, I mean, I guess I'm just saying, I'm not getting where it's adding more, because you can see where it's all on track, you can see where it's in progress, and then the narrative goes through and says, these are some incredible strengths that, like, we're overall, I mean, there's always something like.
It's like the difference between a qualitative versus this is could be a quantitative.
The quantitative is all of this, the rubric that she's using to monitor progress.
I guess where I'm confused is it's so normal to have a rubric on evaluation, but I'm confused why it's not
Yeah,
normal
it's just another step. It's not that it can't be normal, I just don't find them very useful, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the thing. I hate rubrics. I hate them so much. So, I mean, if you want me to do a rubric, I have spent my life going, fine, I'll do your damn rubric.
I mean, it's totally normal. It's totally fine.
I will do it. But the quantitative data is there to tell us, yes, it was done or no, it wasn't. And there is a certain amount of binary in the sense of,
That's what it
we
says
set
here.
this goal, and it
Some
was
of them
done
are
or
progress,
wasn't.
that's why I said that.
So, and yes, I get that sometimes it's the teacher in me that I'm like, okay, so on balance, yes, we got these things accomplished. We are definitely on track to get these things done. I don't know why we need a rubric for that, because to me that, but like I said, I'll do it if that's what y'all want.
the monitoring reports have like focused acceleration areas in them, so, because we're trying to be transparent about, here's what's going well, but also here's where we,
And then I just gotta make this
I don't know if that matters.
which is,
I can't tell.
I'm just so very leery, and this is gonna be the teacher in me again, of tying, I know that in many other industries, we tie engagement performance. We don't do that for our teachers. There are really good reasons we don't do that for our teachers. When we start to go too deeply into, well, she's just doing this really negative job, so we're gonna pay her this much, or, well, she's kind of here on the rubric, so we're gonna pay her that much. And less of what we've been doing, which is kind of, like, here's what we're doing for our administrators. You know what I'm saying? Having a totally separate way of doing that from how you do it for the rest of your personnel, I think is really problematic and is going to cause public
Actually, do
issues.
not two teachers. Don't someone observe them and fill out a form that says how well they're doing and all
It doesn't tie their pay.
Oh, okay, but I thought
That
you were
was just
referring to.
examples. I was just
Yeah.
saying,
In the future, it would help to be able to say,
Because I was trying to figure out like, what is the,
yes, they do it for teachers.
I thought that's what you were saying. We're not trying to suggest something different for Tracy.
Yeah,
than
they
we
do
do
it
to
for
every
teachers.
other employee in the
I'm
district.
saying, I look at how much time our administrators spend on a rubric that's really really of limited use to anyone. Every teacher will tell you that, every administrator will tell you that. And administrators suck up a great deal of time on something no one finds any benefit in. So, like I said, I mean, I've spent my career being told you must use this rubric and say, fine. But in the end, what I know is matters is what I write on the kids' cover sheet on that essay.
And we could do something
I love the passion that you demonstrate here, here, and here. Your organization is a little rough there, there, and there. So, like I said, I'll do the rubric.
And we could translate, I mean, I think it's not new, I feel like we have a lot of sources of information. This is where I'm sorry, let me start to tell you this real quick and then I'll be fine. We have multiple sources of information to evaluate Tracy on. And I think we could probably pull from those and create a rubric from that that's not duplicating any, I mean, it's not increasing like anybody's work or introducing new things for Tracy. Like suddenly you have more things that we're gonna be assessing you on. Like it would tie to the things we've already identified as her goals. I have no problem doing that. I was trying to figure out though, like what the value add when we have both quantitative and qualitative pieces to the evaluation.
For me, the reason is we accept the monitoring reports and you're, showing us your progress and everything. But if all I have are comments at the end in October, when it comes, I've got all this stuff, and my comment has to be, well, I don't really agree with everything in the monitoring report that was given to us. I had concerns about X, Y, and Z, or I'm not feeling that the presentation and the progress on this is right. I feel like I have an obligation to do more than accept what the district has told me is their progress and what the superintendent has told me. Because, in theory, they could come back and say, we did everything, we accomplished everything. And I need to be able to say, well, I don't agree that you accomplished
But the
everything.
data
The
that's
goal is to get scores to come up X percent. You don't agree with that or disagree. Here's the test results. They went up that percent when they didn't.
So how do we evaluate that then?
Right. Was it almost there, so it's pretty good, and I want to give her credit for doing everything she could to get as far as she can? Or do I say, oh, we didn't get 2%, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, some of them,
X.
some of them would be
That.
not achieved.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, that is possible.
And I
It's
know-
acceptable.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, I don't like just no, yes, no.
We're not doing that. So when you look at this, it would be, no, we didn't get to this level. However, we did, because this is a narrative. So the narrative allows for that.
Well, I thought the narrative is because we didn't have any kind of goal set.
I mean, that's been, so let me just caveat all this with, we can do whatever. I'm trying, with my goal, to create two ways that the board is receiving information and creating some consistency, right? Around, we're not gonna swing wildly in the goals that we're setting for our superintendents so that that focus can be there. So the goals are outlined, they align with the strategic plan, obviously. The monitoring reports are set up in alignment with the goals. So the evidence coming in, it's not just like willy-nilly, it's data sources that we go through in the monitoring report and say, this monitoring report is created through these 5 data sources. So it's not just like what Tracy's telling us, it's coming from somewhere, right? And not all of them are on track. Some of them are like, no, we're not. So here's what we're doing
I agree.
to get there. And then the second part of it is the narrative to say, okay, so we recognize that some of these goals are met, some of them are in progress, some of them not met at all, but there's some sort of focused acceleration to get them where they need to go. And then the narrative part is saying, here's what we see as real strengths and where you've gotten us in those areas.
So if you had, how about just a matrix that put together the summary of all the monitoring reports? Sure. So it said 25 complete, 12 in progress, 2 not started.
Sure.
Yes.
I think we may have that.
absolutely work with. The problem I have with rubrics is they always have words like significantly, reasonably. They have these very subjective words, and then you're all parsing together. What do they mean? Where do I place this on here? Is this significant?
But a
Is this-
summary of
But a
it.
summary allows you to
See
just,
the bigger picture.
yeah.
Rather than this. And again, like I'm not the boss of anyone, so I'm one of 5 bosses of you, but not for long. But we, you know, if that's the will of the board, and if it's like, look, we really need to have another piece of this that will kind of provide cohesion or whatever it is that's not there for members, yeah, board members, then we can absolutely do that. I'm trying to, so if it's like a summary of, here's how the monitoring reports are connected to the goals, are connected to the summary, the narrative, absolutely. If it's something else than that and I'm misinterpreting it, I just need to know so that we can make sure we have it, so that Tracy can know what we're doing for October.
I guess, what is the purpose of this evaluation? Is it like for us, is it for the public to be able to review the board's evaluation of the superintendent? Is it
public.
private?
No, it's
Is it an
public.
HR requirement? What is the purpose?
Yeah, it is a statutory requirement and part of our goal.
And who's the audience for the evaluation?
Tracy.
Only. So
Well,
does it go public?
It does, but I'm saying like, yeah. So, but I mean, the goal of it is to be able to help her be the best leader she can be for the district. It really is like any
other evaluation.
Any other evaluation. It is also, I don't know if all of it's public, but some of it's public.
I mean, last year, you guys, the
Yeah, I think we
evaluation
just did it.
document that's in your binders, the narrative,
Yeah.
was supplied to the public, and you voted to accept it in your December meeting.
Yeah, and we make it pretty public.
Yeah, we have a timeline in here for how it will work this year to ensure that the correct board gets to vote on the evaluation report.
Yeah.
But yes, it is a public document.
We chose to use that.
Well, and I think I mean, you guys, the narrative was very helpful last year for me, in that,
Let's do that.
yeah, I mean, this is what I said that I really felt like I needed from you guys. In the final narrative, I think you said to me, these things are going really well. We love how present you are with people. There were multiple things that you felt like I was doing really well. And I think there were two areas where you said, you know, we really need to pay attention to the pace of change. So please continue to do that. And the second thing is we need to make sure we are connecting with the right constituents, like city managers and other. It was sort of like this external sort of relationship building expectation that I think you set. So Lisa, Kim, and I have really worked in those two areas. So when I come back to you this year, I'm hopeful to share with you kind of what I've done to work on those two areas, and it was helpful. I mean, it wasn't rubric, but it was helpful. And I mean, the board, the board sounds like there's still some norming. I hate that word now, by the way. Sorry.
I don't mind doing it up. I just want to make sure that I'm doing my responsible evaluation, not just accepting whatever was sent to me.
It is, I was trying to think, it's a little bit of a feeling that, like, for me, the reason I was asking what it's for is because I'm like, is it meaningful, authentically too? Like, if we have concerns, is it showing up? You know, and that's what I think I want to make sure, like, we are fulfilling the public's, you know, trust in us, that we are both accepting the data coming at us and thinking critically about the data and about the performance. Sorry, it's like your thing, but like, so I think that's what I've been a little confused about it with, like, are we just checking the box on this, or is this really meaningful? And it's been a little ambiguous to be honest to this point. The first year, totally ambiguous. Second year, less so hopefully this year will be a little bit more.
I hope so. I mean, we've spent a lot of time as a board thinking about process for this evaluation. So, I mean, we've had multiple meetings where, as a board, we designed this together. Like, I didn't create this, and Tracy didn't create it. We created it together. So hopefully some of that ambiguity is about newness and going through one full actual cycle of how is this information. I mean, this is my Stephanie perspective. The information has to be most relevant to you or to whoever's in the superintendent chair, because I want for you to succeed. Because if you don't succeed, none of us do. Like we're all and our kids don't. That's the most important part. And then secondarily to me, and I'll just put it there because it is a public document, how are we holding accountable our superintendents to meet these goals that we have agreed collectively are the right goals to have, which we also had a lot of conversations about. So to me, that's the function of it, and the way in which we're holding her accountable. One is that we have these monitoring reports that are data points into the evaluation that we talk about very publicly. And what we want to elevate as being areas that we want for Tracy to focus on and work on, that are not just the you're awesome and great parts, but here's some areas where we want you to work on. That has to be part of that summative evaluation, is to say, how have you done that? Like, what's happening? I mean, that's part of the presentation that will come back to
Or
us.
putting it in that, this needs to be.
Yeah, and like, we're concerned that under goal whatever, this is not looking like it's on the right trajectory. We need concrete steps. What are you going to do to make this, whatever
But
those are.
sometimes you say, no, you didn't meet your goal.
Yeah.
So,
But
it's not doing.
yeah, so can you do it faster, please?
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity as our third
Mhm.
year, as we go through this process, to think about what that narrative is. And if there's a structure that's especially comparable somehow here, because it's hard to read a narrative and absorb those and
Right.
understand it. So, like, is there a way that we could, add more structure to the way that we present the evaluation back? I don't know, maybe it's just a question for us this year.
So I think a couple of changes that will help with that, I think. So one is, we had not started any monitoring reports last time we went through the evaluation, and it was the sort of looking back, looking forward, kind of a hybrid model. So I think having that, and what I'm taking with this is having that sort of summary of like, here are all the monitoring reports, on track, not on track, whatever. And there can be some narrative, some context for those. Will be a helpful starting point. And then, because Tracy already has a lot of that outlined, we've already received some of that information, but having that, and then connecting the narrative, and I can figure out a way to make the narrative maybe more explicit in what it's trying to communicate. I mean, the narrative was written based on what I heard back from a majority of the board as being areas of concern or areas we wanted to lift up as highlights, and from the meeting that we had, right? So taking some of that, putting it in narrative form. If there are specific ways that the narrative can be constructed differently, I mean, I was really going for top 3, bottom 3, and it's just
Yeah, I like the narrative. Maybe my goal
goals.
is really good, but I would like the summary of the monitoring.
Great, done. Sorry, what did you say?
And then maybe to the goals.
Also, some of the goals listed and whether or not those were met.
Should
Usually
all of the goals be listed and whether or not they were met? Right? I mean, isn't that
They will
what
be.
that's what we built last year?
That's what she presented, yeah.
Yeah, so I just meant in our report back, shouldn't we organize it around the goals?
Yeah,
I don't know.
but some of the challenge is that some of the things that we were like, we want you to work on these other things, had nothing to do with her goals. I mean, they were.
It was in the year
It was
to
like,
come.
we want you to do more legislative outreach, or we
Right.
want you to do,
Yeah.
so it's
Too
not,
many things at once.
yeah,
Makes it
yeah.
So basically, you're looking in this evaluation at, here's what you did, which was awesome, thank you very much. Here's where we didn't meet. So we'd like to hear what your plan is to meet it next time, or do we need to change this, or what do we need to do here? And then, also, here are some things that need to happen next year.
Yeah, but I do think they should align with the goals. I mean, they should, like, what we're asking her to do should not be a surprise.
Yes.
When we get in there, it shouldn't be like, yes, and how's the acrobatics going? And you're like, what? That's not me. I'm not that person.
Well,
So,
and also, it seems like here are the goals, how, what's our feedback or reflection, whatever, on each of those. And then it seems like another part of it would be like, are there goals? Like, are there revised goals, or are any of these goals met and we're done? And then that's where I think the top 3, bottom 3 or something can be included as well, but just add a little structure. If every year there's goals set, and then we report back from an evaluative perspective on those goals, and it's very clear.
yeah.
And then it's clear to the superintendent what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, I think all of those things are in there. It's just a matter of, we'll just move the narrative to be directly underneath the goals. That's all fine. It's all, but so I'm not hearing any, I mean, besides the linking more clearly the monitoring reports that we accept as the board to the goals, the format that we were already using, it's really like shifting things to make more sense. Is there anything in addition to that that we need to, like, a new thing? Okay. I just want to make it sure that that we're moving toward a process that feels like it can be consistently applied, so that it's not, you know, that it feels like, especially as new people come on, they're coming into a system that feels safe.
Is there any examples of what people think are good evaluation reports by boards or
Yes,
something?
there's a million of them.
But no good ones?
I mean, we lived through,
Well,
well, yeah,
good.
there's different, I mean,
Yeah.
they're, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I should say,
Yeah,
there's
Why
dozens,
are we recreating this?
there's
We're not
dozens of examples.
recreating it.
Yeah, and,
We've created it.
right, there's dozens of examples, and you can pick any instrument you want. Oregon State School Board Association